Hello and welcome guys. Make yourselves comfortable and enjoy. Well, now, this is Necromancer of the Shadows, chapter 676. Evan stopped using his shadow wings and came down from the sky. Here, this is the reward I received after clearing the 10th floor of the dungeon. After coming down, he took out the silver-colored paper and handed it to Mogul. Seeing the silver-colored paper, Mogul and others stopped thinking about the thing that Evan just did and looked at the details of the paper with a serious look on their faces. Law Essence Pill can only be used by the natives of Eldoria City : After taking this pill, the natives of the Eldoria City's 4 great clans can break free from the restrictions of the world domain and use the Tower of Ascension to go to Utopia. The Law Essence Pill contains the law power of the world domain, and only 4 pills can be produced every 10 years. Law Essence Pill ingredients: 2 deep earth flowers, 3 stalks of magma grass, 5 grams of white profound gold. How to make the pill. After seeing the silver-colored paper had a pill recipe written on it that could allow them to break free from the restrictions of the world domain, the eyes of Noir and others lit up, but soon a deep frown appeared on their faces when they saw only 4 pills can be produced every 10 years. Before Evan cleared the dungeon, they thought that the reward of the dungeon would allow all the people of their clans to break free from the restrictions of the world domain. But with just 4 pills, it is clearly impossible. It seems we need to have a serious discussion about this, Edward said after reading only 4 pills can be produced every 10 years. Mogul and others nodded their heads hearing Edward and read the ingredients they needed in order to make the pill. After reading the names of the ingredients, all of them were once again stunned, because all the ingredients that were listed were very rare. Moreover, what is this last ingredient? Alumi asked with a frown on her face. After reading the name of the last ingredient, Noir suddenly thought about something and looked at Evan. When Mogul and others saw this and read the name of the last ingredient once again, something clicked into their minds as well, and they also looked at Evan. Don't tell me, Edward muttered, looking at Evan. Evan was not surprised when he saw this because he was already expecting this. There were 2 reasons he didn't give the recipe of the pill to Mogul and others in Dungeon Town and first came to Eldoria City. The first reason was because of the Domain Breaker fruit. Mogul knows that Evan has a fruit that can allow him to reach rank 2 quickly. Although only 4 Law Essence pills can be produced every 10 years, Mogul will definitely get one of the pills once they successfully create the pill. After taking the pill, he will be able to use the Tower of Ascension and go to Utopia. He knew in Utopia he would just be a normal orc without any influence, and in order to increase the chances of his survival after going to Utopia, he would need to increase his powers as quickly as possible, and the Domain Breaker fruit is perfect for him to increase his power after going to Utopia. So before giving the recipe of the pill to Mogul and others, Evan decided to come back to Eldoria City so that he could test the effect of his new title and protect himself even if Mogul and others try to snatch the Domain Breaker fruit from him. The second and most important reason Evan decided to come back to Eldoria City before giving them the pill recipe was because of the last ingredient that they needed in order to create the Law Essence Pill: 5 drops of blood of the owner of Eldoria City. Evan doesn't know why, but the last ingredient they need to create the pill is his blood. At first, Evan thought even if he handed over the recipe, they would not be able to tell that he was the owner of the Eldoria City. But then he remembered that Noir had told him that all 4 great clans could contact the spirit of the Tower of Ascension. Although Noir and others do not know who is the owner of the Eldoria City, Evan is sure that once they contact the spirit of the Tower of Ascension, they will definitely find out about him. And once they find out that they need his blood in order to create the pill, will they allow him to leave the world domain? The answer is obviously a no. Even if before leaving Evan left behind a lot of his blood, it wouldn't be enough for them. Although they can produce only 4 pills every 10 years, and need only 5 drops of his blood to create 1 pill, they will eventually run out of it in the future, and the recipe will become useless. So what is the best course of action in that situation? The answer is actually very simple. Mogul and others will try to stop him from using the Tower of Ascension, and will use everything they have in order to collect as much blood as possible from him. Although he might be thinking too much, Evan still wanted to stay cautious. Just the thought of the fact that he may become a blood-producing slave sent shivers down his spine. After coming back to Eldoria City, now that Evan confirmed the power of his title, he wasn't afraid of Mogul and others. Even if all the people of the 4 great clans try to stop him now, they will still be unable to do anything. So you are the owner of the Eldoria City? How? Edward muttered when he saw Evan did not show any kind of surprise when all of them looked at him. After seeing the power that Evan used earlier, it was not hard for them to understand who is the owner of the Eldoria City. Moreover, Noir and others were leaders of their clans and were very smart, so they easily understood why Evan first decided to come back to Eldoria City and showed them his true powers. I don't know why this pill requires my blood, but don't worry. I will leave behind enough blood that will easily last for hundreds of years, Evan said in a calm voice, then narrowed his eyes. So I hope that you won't try to use any foolish method to obtain my blood. While saying this, Evan used the power of his title, and Noir and others felt Evan's words resounding in their heads like a drum. All of them felt a chill running down their spines when they noticed how easily Evan broke their mind defense with just a few words, and they immediately nodded their heads. Seeing them nodding their heads, Evan also stopped using his title and turned around to leave. I know all of you must have many things to discuss now that you have a method to break free from the restrictions, so I won't disturb you any further, he said, and started to walk away. But he suddenly thought about something and looked back at them. By the way, don't forget to send the 50% items from your treasure vault to me, he said and disappeared from there. Chapter 677. Evan sat on a bed in one of the rooms of the Warlord Gang's castle and rubbed his hands in anticipation. Let's see, he said to himself in an excited voice, and looked into one of 3 storage rings that were in front of him. The 3 storage rings were rings that Noir, Illumi and Edward gave him, and each ring was filled with 50% of the items in their treasure vaults. When Evan looked into one of the storage rings, he saw it was filled to the brim. It would take too much time if I looked at them one by one, he muttered and poured the contents of all 3 storage rings into his shadow storage. Once all the items were inside his shadow storage, he looked into it and easily separated them accordingly by using his control over the shadow storage. It took Evan around 5 minutes to arrange all the items, and once he arranged them, he was finally able to see what he had received. There are around 7 million essence stones here, he said, looking at the mountain of the essence stones. Evan was not surprised to see so many essence stones, because he had already expected to receive a few million essence stones. After looking at the essence stones, Evan ignored the other items, and looked at some wooden slips that were placed in a corner of the shadow storage. He took out the wooden slips from the shadow storage, and touched one of them using his spiritual senses. The moment Evan touched the wooden slip with his spiritual senses, some information appeared in his mind. Once Evan sorted out the information that appeared in his mind, a smile appeared on his face. It is good that I asked them to give me these wooden slips. The wooden slips Evan took out actually contained pill recipes and potion formulas. When Evan signed the soul contract with Noir and the others, he asked them to give him recipes for tranquility potion and other pills that they could make. The reason he asked for pill and potion recipes was because of Amara. Although she is a good alchemist, it will take her a long time if she decides to learn these recipes on her own. But with the help of these recipes, she can progress faster, and it wouldn't take her long before she would be able to make potions like the tranquility potion on her own. Moreover, Evan received tens of different kinds of herbs from Noir and others, and they would be useless to him without the potion and pill recipes. Once Evan confirmed that all the wooden slips contained a pill and potion recipe each, he gave them to Amara, so that she could study them. He also gave her all the herbs that he had received, because she was the only one who could use them. After giving her the herbs, Evan looked at the other things. Similar to before, he got thousands of essence condensing pills, and a few source pills from Noir and others. Although these pills were useless to him, he still took them because he remembered how Clone said that source pills are very rare in Utopia. If these pills are rare, then I can sell them at a high price after going to Utopia, Evan muttered to himself. Other than the pills, he received a few tranquility and other potions as well. Most of the things that he received were similar to the things that he found in the treasure vault of the Warlord gang. Too bad I didn't get even a single domain stone from them, Evan said after looking at most of the things. He had asked Noir and others if they could give him domain stones, but all three of them shook their heads and told him that none of them had domain stones. The domain stones are very rare, and it was very difficult to find one. Edward also gave me his ability bead, Evan said when he saw another ability bead in his shadow storage. Now he had 3 ability beads. After checking the ability bead, there were just artifacts left in his shadow storage. Most of the artifacts that Evan received from Noir and others were of S rank, but he did not pay too much attention to them, because he was attracted by 2 artifacts that were releasing the aura of the rank 1 artifacts. One of the 2 artifacts was a black-colored needle that was just 5 centimeters big. Evan took out the needle from his shadow storage, and its details appeared in front of his eyes. Soul Needle, rank 1 high-grade spiritual artifact. A spiritual artifact that can directly attack the soul of the target. Before using this artifact, the user has to refine it using their spiritual power. Evan was stunned after reading the details of the small needle. It was the first time he had seen an artifact that could directly attack the soul of a person. It must be Noir who gave me this artifact, Evan said after a moment. He knows Noir is specialized in soul attacks, and only she could give him a spiritual artifact. It is hard for me to use rank 1 artifact as I am still an S ranker, but it is completely different for spiritual artifact, because my spiritual power is almost comparable to a peak rank 1 evolver, Evan said in a delightful voice, and tried to refine the soul needle using his spiritual power. But after refining it for a minute, he stopped and put it back into his shadow storage. At this speed, it will take me at least 10 hours if I want to refine it, Evan muttered after putting the soul needle away, and decided to refine it later. The second rank 1 artifact was an old-looking bronze pocket watch. He took out the watch from his shadow storage, and its details appeared in front of his retina. Broken Time Watch, rank 1 low grade. Once a highly ranked artifact, but was damaged for unknown reasons, and fell to the lowest level of rank 1. Using this artifact, you can slow down the flow of time within an area of 2 meters around you. Due to its broken condition, this artifact can be used only once a week for 2 hours. The current time difference ratio after activating the time watch is 1:2. Note: the ability of the broken time watch can be enhanced by repairing it. This quote Evan was truly shocked after reading the details of the broken time watch. Although the time watch was broken and was practically useless to him for now, because he could use it only for 2 hours once a week, it did not matter to him. I am not an expert when it comes to artifacts, but even I can tell that artifacts that can affect the flow of times is very rare, Evan muttered in a low voice. I am sure other people are also aware of this fact, so why did they give me such a rare artifact? Evan was not sure who gave him the broken time watch, but he was sure that there must be a reason that person decided to give him this watch. I am sure it's Noir who gave me the soul needle, so it must have been either Edward or Illumi who gave me this broken time watch. Evan thought and decided to ask them about it. If there is nothing wrong with this broken time watch, I can use that thing on it. Evan placed the time watch back into his shadow storage, and looked at the S artifacts that he received from Noir and others. Most of S rank artifacts were useless to him, but he still found 2 useful artifacts among them. One was an S rank mana recovery ring that could increase his mana recovery speed by 50%, and the second artifact was a bracelet that could increase his spiritual power recovery rate by 10%. After taking these 2 S rank artifacts, Evan gave the rest of the artifacts to his shadow undeads to increase their battle power even more. After Evan sorted out everything that he had received from Noir and others, he took a deep breath. Now that I have the title owner of the Eldoria city and I can come back here even after going to Utopia, I need to do a few things before I use the Tower of Ascension. Evan muttered and closed his eyes. After closing his eyes, he used the effect of his title, and felt the power of the laws coursing through his body. Using the power of the laws, Evan searched the entire city and found Malak, who was sleeping at his home. Once he found Malak, he used the power of laws and opened his mouth. Come, with his words, the power of the laws moved, and Malak disappeared from his home. Thud. A thudding sound rang out in Evan's room, and Malak suddenly appeared there out of nowhere. Chapter 678. Thud. With a thudding sound, Malak appeared in Evan's room out of nowhere and fell face first to the ground. As he was an S-rank hunter, this small fall didn't cause any damage to him, and he opened his eyes. After opening his eyes when Malak noticed he was in an unfamiliar place, he was stunned and quickly got up from the ground. What is going? Malak suddenly stopped speaking midway when he noticed Evan sitting in front of him with a frown on his face. He was rubbing his temples and muttering something in a low voice. It seems using the law of space is far more taxing than using the normal laws, Evan said inwardly, when he felt he reached his limit just after teleporting Malak here. After a minute of rest, the strain Evan was feeling on his body subsided a bit, and he finally looked at Malak, who was standing at a distance from him with a confused face. So you are using those essence condensing pills? Huh? Evan said after looking at him as he could feel a small amount of world essence inside Malak's body. Malak felt a little embarrassed when he heard Evan and nodded his head. While giving him the essence condensing pills, Evan had told him that these pills were of low grade, and the world essence that would be produced in his body by consuming these pills would also be of low grade. Evan had advised him that instead of using these low-level pills, he should just use the Tower of Ascension to advance to rank 1. Although Evan was not sure, he had a feeling that if they used the Tower of Ascension instead of the pills, their mana would transform into a higher-level world essence. But now that Malak is using the essence condensing pill to transform his mana into the world essence, it only means one thing. You are not going to use the Tower of Ascension? Evan asked Malak. Malak smiled bitterly when he heard Evan and nodded his head. I thought about it all day yesterday, and after thinking about everything, I decided to stay in the world domain, instead of using the Tower of Ascension. Is there a special reason you decided to stay here? Not really. Malak shook his head hearing Evan's question. I mean, I wasn't able to do anything here in the world domain, and became a slave to the 4 great clans. There were only rank 1 core evolvers here in the world domain, and I almost lost my freedom. I don't even know what will happen if I decide to use the Tower of Ascension and go to Utopia, where rank 1 core evolvers are as common as flies. Besides, Malak took a deep breath after saying this and spoke after a moment. While using the essence condensing pills, I could feel that my core was reaching its limits. So even if I use the Tower of Ascension, I am sure I won't be able to go past rank 1. So there's no point in me risking my life by going to Utopia, when I will not even be able to become a rank 2 core evolver. Evan listened to Malak without saying anything. At first, he thought about asking Malak to reconsider his decision, but after hearing that his core was reaching its limits, he decided not to say anything. If his core is truly reaching its limits, I also think he should stay here in the world domain, rather than go to Utopia. Evan thought inwardly. Even without going to Utopia, Malak can become a rank 1 core evolver by using the essence condensing and source pill. So if his limit is rank 1, then there is no point for him to go Utopia. After becoming the rank 1 core evolver in the world domain, Malak's status will definitely increase, because rank 1 is the limit here. On the other hand, if he uses the Tower of Ascension and goes to Utopia, he may not be able to do anything there. So are you sure you are not going to Utopia? Evan asked Malak one final time. Hearing Evan, Malak nodded his head with the same expression on his face. Evan smiled when he heard Malak and clapped his hand. Well, since you are not going to Utopia, you can work for me in the world domain. Huh? What do you mean by work for you in the world domain? Malak asked in a shocked voice. Don't tell me you're not going to Utopia too. Malak knows how absurd Evan's powers are, and in his eyes, even the leaders of the 4 great clans cannot fight against him. There is no way someone like him will decide to stay in world domain, right? Malak thought inwardly. Of course, I'm going to Utopia. In fact, if everything goes well, I might even leave tomorrow, Evan said when he heard Malak. Why did you ask me that question in the first place if you're going to leave? How will I work for you if you're going to leave? Don't worry, you will soon understand what I mean, Evan said and stood up from the bed he was sitting on. Come with me, he said to Malak and walked out of his room. Malak felt confused when he heard Evan, but he still followed after him. By the way, how did I get here from my home? Evan's lips curved upwards when he heard Malak's question. I used one of my skills to mark you. Because of this skill, I can now control your life and death as I wish. If I want you to die, I just have to say one word and your soul will be obliterated. Oh, Malak did not show any kind of reaction hearing Evan and just nodded his head causally. Evan's mouth couldn't help but twitch seeing Malak's reaction, and he asked him, aren't you afraid now that you are marked by my skill I can kill you with just a single word? Malak shrugged his shoulders hearing Evan and said in a shameless voice, I am just a weakling. Even without marking me, you can easily slap me to death, so why should I be afraid of your skill? Evan was speechless when he heard Malak. Although what you just said is true, you should at least try to act with dignity. Malak snorted when he heard Evan and did not say anything. Evan brought Malak deeper area of the castle and stopped in front of the room where he had first met Noir and others. Let's hope they will not try to make things difficult for me, Evan thought, and opened the door of the room. Chapter 679. When Evan opened the door, he saw Noir, Edward, Mogul, and Alumi discussing something. When the door opened and Noir and the others sensed Evan's presence, they stopped discussing and looked at him. You are here? Edward nodded his head when he saw Evan and gestured with his hand for him to take a seat. Evan nodded his head hearing Edward and looked behind him, signaling Malak to follow him. Edward and others raised an eyebrow when they saw Malak, because they didn't expect Evan to bring someone with him. Malak was stunned when he entered the room and saw Mogul and others. He did not expect Evan to bring him to see the leaders of the 4 great clans. Evan didn't care about how Edward and others were looking at Malak, and sat down on a chair. Are you guys done with your discussion? He asked after sitting down. Mogul and others didn't reply to him immediately, and once again looked at Malak. The matter of the law essence pill was of great importance to them, and they did not want to reveal its existence to other people. Seeing they were looking at Malak, Evan said in a reassuring voice, you guys don't have to worry about him. I can guarantee that he won't tell about this matter to anyone. Edward and the others looked at each other, hearing Evan, and nodded their heads after a moment. We discussed the matter of the law essence pill, and decided to use soul contract in order to make sure nothing goes wrong with it, Edward said, and showed a soul contract to Evan. Honestly, Evan wasn't much interested in knowing how they were going to handle the law essence pill, but he still looked at the soul contract. There were many terms in the soul contract, but Evan only looked at a few important points like dash. All 4 great clans will receive 1 pill each once they produce the pills. The alchemists of the 4 great clans will work together while creating the pills, so that no one can try anything weird. Only the alchemists and the leaders of the 4 great clans are allowed to know about the existence of the law essence pill, and the alchemists who will work on the pill must sign a separate soul contract that they will not reveal its existence to anyone. Well, I can understand that they don't want their people to fight against each other. That's why they want to hide the existence of this pill. Evan thought after reading the 3rd term. If other people of the 4 great clans learn about the existence of the law essence pill, some people will definitely try to do everything in their power to get their hands on it, even if it means to rebel against their own clan. Evan glanced at the other terms, and after a brief moment, he returned the soul contract back to Edward. So, do you guys have all the ingredients to make the law essence pill? He asked after giving back the soul contract. Alumi shook her head hearing Evan and said in a frustrated voice, the ingredients we need to create the law essence pill are extremely rare, and currently we just have 2 sets of ingredients. Evan raised an eyebrow when he heard Alumi. So you want to collect 4 sets of ingredients first, so that you can make all 4 pills at once. But to Evan's surprise, Edward shook his head when he heard him and said with a bitter smile on his face, actually, we showed the recipe of the law essence pill to our best alchemist, and according to them, it is very hard to successfully create this pill. They told us that if we want 4 pills, we need to provide at least 40 sets of ingredients, because the chances of failure while creating this pill are extremely high. Alright, I completely forgot that the chances of pill failure while making them are extremely high, Evan thought hearing Edward and nodded his head in understanding. Can I use the power of laws to increase the chances of successful pill refinement? Evan suddenly thought, but he wasn't certain if law power could affect the process of alchemy. Well, whatever, he did not think too much about it, and stopped thinking about the alchemy. He looked back at Illumi and others and asked another question. Since you need to collect the ingredients, you guys are not going to use the Tower of Ascension anytime soon, right? Yeah, even if we collect enough ingredients, it is not like we can leave our people right away. There are many things we need to do before we can leave, so it will take us at least a year before we can leave from here, Noir said, hearing Evan. Evan thought about it for a moment and took out 4 bottles that were filled with blood. I think I will be leaving tomorrow, Evan said after placing the bottles on the table. Here is the last ingredient that you guys need to make the pill. Mogul and others were stunned when they saw the bottles of blood. Each bottle was around 3 liters in size and was filled to the brim. It had only been about 10 hours since Evan had returned to Eldrich City, so they couldn't understand how Evan had filled so many bottles with his blood in such a short period of time. Evan could not help but smile when he saw the stunned expressions on the faces of Mogul and others. Death transfer is really a cheat-like skill, he thought inwardly, remembering how he filled the 4 bottles of blood without much effort. By using this skill, Mogul and others soon came out of their shock and took 1 bottle each. You are leaving tomorrow? Illumi asked after taking the bottle of blood. Yeah. Now there is nothing I have to do here in World Domain. But before leaving, there is something I need to discuss with you guys, Evan said, and his face turned serious. Seeing Evan's serious expression, Edward and the others looked at each other and nodded, signaling him to continue speaking. Seeing them nodding their heads, Evan looked at Malak and opened his mouth. I want to create a 5th clan here in the Eldrich City. 2 hours later, Evan and Malak left the meeting room. Evan was in a good mood after the meeting ended and was humming while walking. Meanwhile, Malak had a dark look on his face, and he was still processing the things that had just happened in the meeting room. Hey, you want to kill me, right? Malak suddenly asked. Maybe, Evan replied in a nonchalant voice, not caring about Malak's dark expression. I hope a worm monster eats you when you reach Utopia, Malak said when he heard Evan's carefree reply, and left from there. Evan ignored Malak and looked at the broken time watch that was in his shadow storage. Now that I confirmed that there is nothing wrong with this watch, I can use that thing on it, he thought to himself, and a look of anticipation appeared on his face. Chapter 680. Malak left the castle of the Warlord gang, after separating from Evan, as he had a lot of things to do after the meeting. Meanwhile, Evan didn't return to his room, and waited in the outer area of the castle. After a few minutes, he heard the sound of footsteps and saw Noir coming towards him. Thanks for your help during the meeting. If it weren't for you, they wouldn't have agreed to my proposal so easily, Evan said when he saw Noir. Not that anything would have changed even if we all disagreed with your proposal, Noir said in a calm voice, and stopped some distance away from him. Evan just smiled slightly when he heard Noir and didn't comment on her remark. Noir also no longer talked about what had happened in the meeting, and went straight to the point. The day after you left for the dungeon town, I tried to contact the spirit of the Tower of Ascension, but unfortunately I got no response from it. You didn't receive any response. Evan frowned when he heard Noir. Noir sighed when she saw the frown on Evan's face and nodded her head. As I told you before, even though the 4 great clans have a method to contact the spirit of the Tower of Ascension, it does not mean we can talk to it wherever we want. It rarely responds to us unless it is a matter of great importance. So there is no way for us to know what happened to Claire. Evan asked, hearing Noir. He honestly wanted to know what had happened to Claire, so that he could understand what is her relationship with Hana. Unfortunately, no. Noir shook her head and said with a frustrated expression on her face. Unless the spirit of the Tower of Ascension responds to my calls, there is no way for us to know what happened to Claire, and what is the relationship between your Hana and her. Evan fell into deep thought hearing Noir. Can I use the power of my title to contact the spirit of the Tower of Ascension? He thought and decided to give it a try after going back to his room. By the way, the reward you received for clearing the dungeon is really something else, Noir suddenly said in order to change the topic, as she did not want to talk about Claire. The more she thought about her, the angrier she felt towards the spirit of the Tower of Ascension for not responding to her. Evan smiled warily hearing Noir and said in an honest voice, believe me, it wasn't easy for me to get this reward, and honestly, I am 100% sure that even if you and other clan leaders somehow managed to enter the dungeon, you still would not have been able to get this reward. The only reason Evan was able to successfully obtain the deed of the Eldoria city was because of Gobu, who noticed the hidden dimension on the 7th floor. Had he not been there, Evan would not have been able to obtain his new title. Furthermore, even if Noir and the others somehow managed to enter the dungeon and successfully founded the hidden dimension, Evan was sure that it would have been incredibly difficult for them to defeat the eldritch creature. He was able to defeat that creature only because of his authority and the unique skills that he had used while fighting against it. Although Noir and others are powerful, Evan doesn't believe that they have the power to defeat an eldritch creature, especially when their world essence is not very powerful, because of the effect of low-level essence condensing pills. Noir was surprised when she heard Evan. Although she could see that Evan was not trying to mock her or any other clan leader, she still couldn't help but feel that he was spouting nonsense. In her eyes, if Evan doesn't use the power of his title, she could easily defeat him. Evan also noticed that Noir didn't believe in his words, but he didn't care about it. Well, since you can't contact the spirit of Tower, then it can't be help. I will take my leave now, Evan said after a moment and turned around to leave. I am not sure, but you might be able to talk to the spirit of the Tower of Ascension when you use the tower tomorrow, Noir suddenly said when she saw Evan was leaving. What do you mean? Evan stopped when he heard Noir and asked with a surprised look on his face. Didn't you tell me that the spirit of the tower was looking at Hana when you arrived in the world domain? Noir said with a pondering look on her face. Since it was looking at Hana, it might try to contact you when you use the tower to go to Utopia. Evan thought about what Noir said and nodded his head. Although the chances are low, I do hope that the spirit of the tower will contact me, Evan thought inwardly and left from there after thanking Noir. Evan returned to his room in the castle of the Warlord gang and sat down on his bed. After sitting down, he closed his eyes and used the law power of his title to see if he could talk to the spirit of the Tower of Ascension. As Evan used the law power of his title, he noticed that other than him, there was another faint presence within Eldoria City that could use the power of the laws. Is this the presence of the spirit? Evan thought when he felt the faint presence that could use the law power as well. Using his law power, Evan tried to establish a connection with the faint presence he was feeling. Because of his law power, it was not hard for him to establish a connection with the faint presence. But the moment Evan established the connection with the faint presence, he felt all the hair on his body stand up to no end. Evan quickly stopped using the power of his title, and the moment he stopped using the power of his title, COUGH*, he coughed out a mouthful of blood and felt a terrible headache assaulting him. Damn it, although I established the connection only for a split second, my body reached its limit in that split second, Evan muttered, and used the death transfer skill to relieve the strain he was feeling. It seems I cannot talk to the spirit of the tower with my current power level. If I want to talk to it using the power of laws, I will have to increase my power even more. As Evan was thinking about what just happened, he felt something, and his expression changed. A strange power suddenly filled the room he was staying in, and a powerful pressure engulfed the entire castle. What the hell is going on? Evan stood up when he felt the pressure and thought about using his law power once again. But before he could do anything, a strange emotionless voice rang out in his head. If you want to talk to me, come to Tower of Ascension. Chapter 681. Is there any news from him? Mogul asked Jurok with a frown on his face. Hearing Mogul, Jurok shook his head. He has been staying in his room for the past month, and didn't leave it even for once. The frown on Mogul's face deepened when he heard Jurok. What is this guy planning now? According to what he said, he should have left the world domain a month ago. But forget about leaving the world domain. He did not even leave his room for the past month, Mogul thought inwardly and tapped his finger on the table. Suddenly, the expressions of both Mogul and Jurok changed. What is this unusual flow of energy? Mogul asked, looking towards a specific direction of the castle. These energy waves are coming from the direction where that guy is staying. Mogul's face turned serious when he heard Jurok, and both of them immediately dashed in the direction from where the energy waves were coming. Following the energy waves, Mogul and Jurok arrived outside of Evan's room. Did something happen to him? Jurok asked Mogul, feeling the unusual energy waves that were coming out of Evan's room. Mogul looked at Evan's room door with a frown on his face, and thought about looking inside. But before he could open the door, "Don't do anything." They heard a voice and saw Asher standing some distance away from them. Seeing Asher, Mogul sighed in relief and calmed down. Since this guy is not panicking, then it means there is nothing to worry about, Mogul said inwardly. What is he doing? And what are these energy waves? He asked Asher after calming down. Don't worry about these energy waves. Master told me to inform you that he will be leaving the world domain in a few hours. Asher did not answer Mogul's question and said what Evan had told him earlier. He will be leaving in a few hours. Mogul was stunned when he heard Asher and looked at Evan's room with a confused look on his face. Just what has this guy been doing for the last month? Inside the room, Evan was sitting cross-legged on his bed. There was a peaceful expression on his face, and his entire body was covered in the dark purple void energy. The space around him was trembling from time to time, and some small void cracks were opening all over his room. Evan continued to sit in the same position for around 1 hour. After 1 hour, the void energy that was covering him suddenly went inside his body, and Evan opened his eyes. He exhaled lightly after opening his eyes, and looked at his status window with a small smile on his face. Current understanding of the conceptual energy of void, 10.0001%. After 1 month of hard work, my understanding of void energy finally reached 10%, Evan said to himself with a pleased look on his face. He was thinking of leaving world domain a month ago, but after thinking deeply, he decided to postpone it for a month. Utopia is a dangerous place, and Evan wasn't even sure where the Tower of Ascension would send him once he used it. In order to keep himself safe, Evan wanted to be in his best condition while using the Tower of Ascension. But in the ruins, he used one of his strongest trump cards, his authority, which has a cooldown time of 1 month. After taking everything into consideration, Evan decided to wait for the cool-down time of his authority to end before using the Tower of Ascension. During this 1 month, Evan had nothing to do, so he decided to increase his understanding about void energy. Although he could use the void study skill only for 15 minutes a day, Evan was still able to increase his understanding to 10% during this 1 month. Furthermore, after increasing his understanding of void energy to 10%, he comprehended another skill related to void energy. Just as he comprehended the void break skill, after reaching 5% understanding of void energy. The new skill that Evan comprehended wasn't an offensive skill, nor it was a defensive skill. The new skill that he comprehended was actually similar to his void study skill. Until now, if Evan wanted to increase his understanding of void energy, he had to rely on the void study skill of his boots. The short amount of time that the void study skill gives him is not a problem for the time being, as his spiritual power is barely enough for him to use all 15 minutes of the void study skill. But this will be completely different in future. Once Evan becomes a rank 1 core revolver, his spiritual power will increase greatly, and he will be able to study the mysteries of the void for a longer period of time. At that time, the 15 minutes of the void study skill will not be enough for him. But thanks to the new skill he has just learned, Evan no longer has to worry about this problem. The new skill he just learned allows him to harness void energy through his spiritual senses. Using the conceptual energy of the void through his spiritual senses, Evan can send his spiritual senses inside the void, just as he does when using the void study skill. My 1 month of hard work wasn't in vain, Evan muttered after a moment and stood up from the bed. Now that the cool-down time of my authority is ended, it is time for me to leave the world domain. Evan left his room and saw Asher standing outside of his room. Mogul and Durok had already gone back to their work after Asher told them that there was nothing wrong with Evan. Evan called Asher back to his shadow storage, and went to the deeper area of the castle, where Mogul usually stays. For the next few hours, Evan met with Edward, Malak and others. Once he told them he was going to leave and said goodbye to them, he found himself standing in front of a light blue portal gate. After passing through this teleportation gate, you will reach the entrance to the Tower of Ascension, which is connected to the city of Eldoria, Alumi said, looking at the small portal with a look of desire in her eyes. You guys can't use this portal? Evan asked when he noticed even Edward, Mogul and Noir were looking at the portal with desire-filled eyes. We are still bound by the laws of the world domain, and cannot approach the Tower of Ascension, but we should be able to use this portal after taking the Law Essence pill, Edward said when he heard Evan. Evan nodded his head in understanding, hearing Edward, and looked at Malak. "Try your best, otherwise I will throw you in front of some monsters next time we meet." Malak did not reply, hearing him, and just lifted his middle finger. Evan laughed when he saw this and took a step forward. "Let's hope we will meet again in future," he said, and disappeared into the portal. Chapter 682. "This place is completely different from what I expected," Evan muttered after passing through the portal gate. After entering the portal gate, Evan found himself standing in a beautiful garden-like place. In this enchanting garden, vibrant flowers of every hue were blooming beneath the lush canopies of towering trees. Butterflies were dancing among the flowers, and birds created a melodious symphony as they flitted from branch to branch. Squirrels playfully scamper across the manicured pathways, adding a lively touch to the serene landscape. The air was filled with the sweet fragrance of blossoms, and a serene pond was reflecting the azure sky. In the middle of the garden, Evan saw the huge Tower of Ascension piercing the sky, and looking as if it was reaching into another realm. "What a beautiful place," Evan muttered after looking around, and walked towards the center area of the garden where the tower was located. After a few minutes of walking, Evan came across a normal-looking gate leading into the tower. It seems all the people who were guarding the entrance of the Tower of Ascension, connected to Eldoria City, already left after Mogul and others freed them from their contracts. Previously, this entrance of the tower was guarded by the people who were forced to sign a contract with the 4 great clans of Eldoria City, but after Evan cleared the dungeon and solved the problem of Noir and others, they freed the people who were forced to guard the entrance here. Most of the people who were freed from the contract immediately left the world domain. Meanwhile, some of them decide to stay in the world domain and gather some resources before leaving. "The spirit of the tower told me to come to the Tower of Ascension if I wanted to talk to it," Evan muttered, wondering what should he do now. He tried calling the spirit of the tower several times, but there was no response from it. "Do I need to enter the tower to talk to it?" Evan asked himself when he did not receive any response from the tower, and looked at the entrance in front of him. After looking at the entrance of the tower for a few seconds, he took a deep breath, and his eyes turned sharp. "If the voice that I heard that day was the same voice that I am thinking about, then the things regarding the world domain are a lot more complicated than I initially thought," Evan thought, as the memory of the day when he heard the voice of the spirit of tower came into his mind. "I hope that after talking to this spirit, I will be able to resolve some of my doubts," Evan muttered, and took a step forward, entering the Tower of Ascension. The moment Evan entered the tower, he felt a strange power enveloping his body, and he lost all of his senses. He could not hear anything, nor he could smell anything. Even his vision turned black, and he felt like he was just floating in a boundless space, without being able to control his body. Although Evan lost all of his senses, for some reason, he didn't feel nervous or anything. On the contrary, he felt a strange sense of relaxation spreading all over his body, as if all of his worries and all of his desires were useless. Evan knew that he shouldn't submerge himself into this feeling as it might be dangerous, but he still could not help but think that maybe he should just stop caring about everything and stay here. As Evan was losing his touch with reality, his spiritual power suddenly surged on its own, and he regained all of his senses. The moment Evan regained all of his senses, cold sweat appeared on his forehead. "F***K, if my spiritual power didn't react on time, I might have lost my ego and would have turned into an idiot," Evan cursed after regaining his senses. Just the fact that a moment ago he was thinking of staying here for the rest of his life made his heart turn cold. "Just what the hell is this place?" Evan muttered and looked around him, trying to see where he was. But the moment he looked around him, Evan was completely stunned because he saw a boundless starry sky, and he was floating in it like a small pebble. Giant asteroids were moving around him like spaceships. His silhouette was illuminated by distant galaxies, and the sun and moon were rotating around the different planets that were decorating the starry sky. Far away from him, some dead planets exploded and turned into cosmic dust. The power of the explosions gave birth to black holes, and some nearby small stars were swallowed inside them. Even though Evan was far away from the black holes and he could feel that he was safe, he still could not help but sweat buckets after seeing some of the planets exploding in front of him. "Where the hell am I?" Evan asked himself, not understanding what was going on. As Evan was thinking about his situation, a bright light suddenly covered the entire starry sky. Evan was forced to close his eyes because of the intensity of the light, and when the light disappeared after a moment and he opened his eyes, he found himself standing in the middle of a boundless white space. All the stars, asteroids, galaxies, black holes, planets, everything that was in the starry sky disappeared. Just what is going on here? Although I thought that I might have to face some trials after entering the Tower of Ascension, I never thought that I would receive a space trip without a space suit after entering the tower, Evan muttered in a speechless voice, trying to understand what was happening. As Evan was looking around the white space, he suddenly felt chaotic energy fluctuations emerging from the front of him. Evan's expression turned serious when he felt the chaotic energy waves, and his mana started to move within his body. Crack, crack. The space in front of him started to crack like a glass because of the chaotic aura. Evan tried to use wind manipulation skill to cover his body with the wind in order to increase his agility, but noticed that there was no wind in the white space where he was standing. The wind manipulation skill gives him the ability to manipulate the wind of the surroundings, but it doesn't give him the ability to create wind out of nowhere, so the wind manipulation skill was completely useless in the white space where there was no wind. Noticing he could not use wind manipulation skill, Evan used the temporal velocity skill. The world around him slowed down, and at the same time, his agility was increased by 30, because of the effective skill. Crack, crack. The cracks in the space continued to spread, and after a moment, cracked. The space in front of Evan collapsed and the chaotic aura he was feeling intensified. Amid the chaotic aura, Evan suddenly felt another energy, and a shocked look appeared on his face. This aura is similar to the aura that I felt from the eldrich creature in the dungeon, Evan muttered in a shocked voice, and got ready to attack in case an eldrich creature came out of the space crack. As Evan was getting ready to attack, suddenly something came out of the space crack. Whoosh. F-U*K. It is really an eldrich creature, Evan cursed when an arm which was covered in eldritch energy came out of the space crack. Evan was about to launch his attack at the arm, when suddenly a strange power filled with entire white space. A powerful pressure descended all over the white space, and the next second, close, a cold, emotionless voice rang out throughout the white space. The power of the laws moved, and the space crack that was in front of Evan started to close. Woo-oh. Evan heard a strange, angry voice from the depth of the space crack, and the arm which was covered in eldritch energy tried to stop the space crack from closing. Although the arm covered in eldritch energy tried to stop the space crack from closing, it wasn't able to fight against the power of laws, and eventually the space crack closed. Evan looked at everything with a stunned expression on his face, not understanding what just happened. While Evan was still standing with a dazed expression, a small golden orb that was releasing a terrifying power came down from the sky and stopped some distance away from him. Evan came out of his shock when he noticed the small golden orb and felt the terrifying aura that was coming out from it. Are you the spirit of the Tower of Ascension? Evan asked in an uncertain voice when he noticed the small golden orb. Yes. Answering Evan's question, an emotionless cold voice that was neither male nor female came out of the golden orb. When Evan heard the voice that came out of the orb, his breathing quickened. A month ago when I tried to contact you, I thought I was hallucinating when I heard your voice. But after hearing your voice once again, I am now certain, Evan muttered in a low voice, and took a step towards the golden orb. You were the one who asked me that cringe question, what do I want to sacrifice, when I was about to die in the Shadow Kingdom dungeon, right? Chapter 683. In the Aurora world, after his battle against the Shadow Bat, Evan had accidentally fell into the ruin of the Shadow Kingdom dungeon. That ruin was completely different from any other ruin he had ever seen. There was no monster in that ruin, nor there was any reward in it. When he was about to die there, he heard a cold, emotionless voice, which was neither male nor female, asking him what he wanted to sacrifice. At that time, out of anger because of his shadow physique, which did not allow him to absorb any core other than the shadow core, Evan had sacrificed his shadow physique and awakened his shadow monic physique. Although it has been over a year, Evan still hasn't forgotten the voice he heard in the Shadow Kingdom dungeon, and the voice of the spirit of the Tower of Ascension was very similar to that voice. In fact, calling it similar would be an understatement because its voice was exactly like that voice. Why are you silent? You were the one who helped me at that time, right? Evan once again asked when the spirit of the tower didn't reply to him. Why did you help me at that time? Evan rubbed his eyebrows and felt frustrated when the spirit of the tower did not say anything hearing his question. He was about to ask once again, but the spirit of the Tower of Ascension suddenly spoke. I don't know what you are talking about. The spirit's voice was the same as before, and there was no emotion in it even after hearing what Evan had just asked. Evan showed a mocking smile when he heard the spirit and said in a sarcastic voice, "Do you take me for a fool? There is no way I can forget the voice that I heard that day. I am 100% certain it was your voice that asked me what I wanted to sacrifice. I don't know what this sacrifice thing that you are talking about, but my voice is the reflection of this entire universe. I am connected with the thousands of small worlds similar to the world from where you came to world domain. Each of these small worlds has a part of my will imprinted on them, and these imprint wills are the ruler of these small worlds, who maintains the world law in them." The spirit of the Tower of Ascension explained to Evan in the same voice and continued to speak. "The parts of my will which are imprinted on these small worlds act on their own to maintain the laws in these worlds. The thing that you are talking about might be related to my will which is imprinted in the world where you came from." Evan frowned when he heard the spirit of the Tower of Ascension. "So you are saying that at that time it was not you but the will of Aurora World that helped me, and since the will of Aurora World is your imprint, its voice was similar to yours?" "Yes." The frown on Evan's face deepened. "Then why did the will of Aurora World help me?" After meeting with Clone in the Inferno dungeon, Evan always thought that the person who helped him in the Shadow Kingdom dungeon might be an essence clone, but that essence clone was somehow destroyed once he made the deal with him. But hearing what the spirit of the Tower of Ascension just said, Evan realized that this matter is also not simple. "I don't know why the will of your world helped you." Evan raised an eyebrow when he heard the spirit of the tower, and said in a slightly dissatisfied voice, "Didn't you just say the will of the Aurora World is the imprint of your will? If the will of Aurora World is the imprint of your will, then shouldn't you know why it helped me at that time?" "I don't know why it helped you because I am also an imprint will. If you want to know why the will of your world helped you, you will have to ask the true will of the universe. You are also an imprint will." Evan was stunned when he heard the spirit of the Tower of Ascension. "What do you mean you are also an imprint will?" "You can say that the wills that are imprinted in the worlds like Aurora are the lower level wills. The will that is imprinted in the world domain is the mid-level will, and above all is the supreme will that is the will of Utopia," Evan said before the spirit of the tower could finish speaking. "Yes. So you are saying if I want to know why the will of the Aurora World helped me, I will have to ask the will of Utopia?" Evan asked, hearing what the spirit of the tower just said. "Yes, the will of the Utopia is the supreme will and represents the laws of this entire universe. If what you said is true and the will of your world really helped you, then it must have been because of the will of Utopia." Evan rubbed his eyebrows hearing the spirit of tower, and didn't know what to say. After a minute, he looked back at the golden orb and asked again, "How am I supposed to contact the will of Utopia? I don't even know the method of talking to the will of lower worlds, much less the will of Utopia." The spirit of the tower was silent, hearing Evan as if it was deep in thought. After some time, the golden orb in front of Evan suddenly shook, and a light came out of it. Evan was stunned when he saw this, and subconsciously tried to dodge the light, but the speed of light was too fast, and before he could do anything, the light went inside his head. What was Evan wanted to ask what was that golden light, but before he could ask anything, some information started to appear in his mind. When Evan noticed the information appearing in his mind, he quickly understood what was happening, and didn't try to reject it. "Forbidden Land," Evan muttered once he registered all the information in his mind. "Yes, if you want to talk to the Supreme Will, you will have to go to the Forbidden Land of Utopia." Chapter 684. "You were the one who was looking at Hana when I entered the world domain, right?" Evan asked the main question that he wanted to ask once the spirit of the tower told him about the Forbidden Land of Utopia. "Yes." "Is it because she is related to Claire?" Evan summoned Hana from his shadow storage and asked. "Your undead is not related to Claire, she is Claire herself, or at least a part of the real Claire." "What do you mean?" Evan asked with a confused expression while looking at Hana, who was in his arms. The spirit of the tower was silent for some time, hearing Evan, and spoke after a minute. "Around 2 years ago, Claire went to Dungeon Town for some business. While on her way to Dungeon Town, she saw a phenomenon which was related to the birth of a high-ranking treasure. At that time, she was at the peak of rank 1, so although she was alone, she still decided to fight against other monsters to get that treasure. After a tough fight against the monsters, she successfully snatched the treasure and safely escaped from there. After escaping, when she examined that treasure, she was shocked because the treasure she snatched was actually a rank 3 treasure that could help her break free from the restrictions of the world domain and allow her to advance to rank 2. Wait a moment, Evan interrupted the spirit of the tower midway when he heard what it was saying. He took a deep breath and asked with a shocked look on his face, "What do you mean by a rank 3 treasure?" According to what I know, the density of the world essence in the world domain is not enough to give birth to a rank 3 treasure. Even the rank 2 treasures are born very rarely, then how can a rank 3 treasure appear here? You are right, not only the density of the essence, even the laws of the world domain are not strong enough to give birth to a rank 3 treasure. Then how did a rank 3 treasure appear here? Evan asked in a voice full of confusion, not understanding how did a rank 3 treasure appear here in the world domain. It appeared here because of me. I used my law power and authority over the world domain to create that rank 3 treasure. What the Evan was shocked hearing the spirit, but suddenly something came into his mind, and he said in a gloomy voice, "If you have the power to create a rank 3 treasure, then you should have used your authority to make my domain break a fruit, a rank 3 treasure as well." The spirit of the tower was speechless. Do you think it is easy to create a rank 3 treasure? For the first time, Evan noticed that the voice of the spirit was not emotionless. It sounded a little bit frustrated. I had to use all of the energy that I was saving for thousands of years in order to create that rank 3 treasure without damaging the laws of world domain. But even then, Evan raised an eyebrow hearing the spirit of the Tower of Ascension, but didn't comment on it and continued to listen to it. When Claire saw she could break through to the next rank using that treasure, she immediately decided to reifine it. After a month of effort, she successfully refined the treasure, and under the law power of the rank 3 treasure, which was far stronger than the law power of the world domain, she broke free from the restrictions and advanced to rank 2. The spirit of Tower said and continued to speak. After advancing to rank 2, she wanted to go back to Eldoria City to inform everyone about this matter. But the moment Claire advanced to rank 2, the laws of the world domain rejected her existence here, and she was directly sent to the Tower of Ascension. You mean a rank 2 core evolver can't stay in the world domain? Yes. A deep frown appeared on Evan's face when he heard what the spirit of the tower just said. If a rank 2 core evolver can't stay in the world domain, then doesn't it mean I cannot come back here using my title after advancing to rank 2? You don't have to worry about this restriction. Because you can control the laws of Eldoria City, you can come back here even after advancing to rank 2. The spirit of the tower said when it noticed the deep frown on Evan's face. Evan sighed in relief when he heard this, and asked the main questions that were bothering him. You said you used your saved up energy and your authority over the world domain to create that rank 3 treasure. Why did you create that rank 3 treasure that allowed Claire to advance to rank 2? And how is she connected with Hana? How did Hana end up in Aurora World if Claire was sent to the Tower of Ascension by the laws of the world domain? There were many questions in Evan's mind, and he asked them without beating around the bush. The spirit of the tower didn't reply instantly. Evan didn't speak again and waited for the spirit of the tower to speak. After a full minute of silence, the spirit of the Tower of Ascension finally spoke. I created that rank 3 treasure because I needed the help of a powerful rank 2 core evolver to do something for me. Claire was a powerful core evolver. You can tell that just by looking at the power of your undead. Evan nodded his head hearing the spirit because he knew just how absurd Hana's spiritual power is. After advancing to rank 2, her power increased even more, and I thought she would be able to help me. But unfortunately, she met with an accident while helping me, and her soul was split into 2 parts. One part of her soul was sent to Utopia, while the second part was lost into the void. Chapter 685. Unfortunately, Claire met with an accident while helping me, and her soul was split into 2 parts. One part of her soul was sent to Utopia, while the second part was lost into the void. What do you mean her soul was split into 2 parts? No exclamation point ... before that. What was it that you needed Claire's help with? Evan was shocked to hear that Claire's soul was split into two parts. Normally, only a powerful spiritual attack can shatter a person's soul. But Claire was a phantom cat, and her spiritual power was far stronger than normal core evolvers. Moreover, after refining the rank 3 treasure, she became a rank 2 core evolver, so Evan couldn't even imagine just how strong her spiritual power was at that time. If her soul was split into two even with such a strong spiritual power, then it must have been because of someone whose spiritual power was even stronger than her. Evan thought inwardly, and waited for the response of the spirit of the Tower of Ascension. The spirit of the tower was once again silent. Hearing Evan didn't rush the spirit to give him an answer, because he knew that it was thinking about whether to tell him or not. After a full 5 minutes of silence, Evan felt the spirit of the tower sighed and finally made a decision. Do you remember what had happened earlier? Evan raised an eyebrow hearing the spirit. You mean the scene of the starry sky that I saw earlier? No, that scene was just the view of the outside of the Tower of Ascension. Currently, you are on the middle level of the Tower of Ascension, only a step away from reaching the boundary of Utopia. Evan frowned when he heard the spirit of the Tower of Ascension and suddenly thought about something. If you are not talking about the starry sky, then do you mean the eldrich creature that came out of the space crack? Yes, right bracket. The spirit of the Tower of Ascension said, and it continued. I needed Claire's help to defeat an eldritch creature for me. Defeat an eldritch creature? Evan was once again stunned hearing the spirit of Tower. After seeing what had happened earlier, Evan already guessed that the things regarding the eldritch creatures are not as simple as they seem. He even suspected that the eldritch creature he defeated in the dungeon was there for a reason. What's the deal with these eldritch creatures? How can they appear here in the world domain? Hearing Evan's question, the golden orb in front of him shook a little as if it was shaking its head. I can't tell you anything about this matter. Evan narrowed his eyes when he heard the spirit of Tower. You can't tell me, or is that you don't know yourself? Evan continued to look at the golden orb. When he did not receive any reply from it, he sighed a little and waved his hand. Forget it. Tell me more about the eldritch creature who shattered Claire's soul, Evan said, and looked at the spirit of Tower with a small smile on the corner of his lips. If I am not wrong, you called me here because you wanted to deal with that eldritch creature, right? Yes. The spirit of Tower replied after a moment of silence. Because it really called Evan for this reason. The eldritch creature who shattered Claire's soul is actually living in the middle of the Essence Corridor. Essence Corridor. What is that? Evan asked with a look of confusion on his face. Once someone uses the Tower of Ascension, their mana will evolve into World Essence. The Essence Corridor is the place where the mana of the evolvers who use the Tower of Ascension transforms into World Essence. A place where your mana will transform into World Essence. Evan was surprised to hear the spirit of the Tower. You are saying there is an eldritch creature living in such an important place? The golden orb in front of Evan slumped down as if it was depressed. It happened around 3 years ago. For some reason, the space barrier around the Essence Corridor collapsed and a void crack appeared there. This eldritch creature was within that void crack. For the past 3 years, it has been living within that void crack, and using its eldritch energy to prevent the crack from closing. Most of the time, this eldritch creature doesn't do anything and sleeps all day in order to preserve its energy. But occasionally it would wake up and attack the evolvers who are passing through the Essence Corridor. The spirit of the Tower of Ascension paused after saying this, and spoke after a moment of silence. In the past 3 years, it killed more than 15,000 evolvers who were passing through the Essence Corridor. Evan felt a chill running down his spine hearing the spirit of Tower. 15,000 S-rankers who were on the verge of becoming a rank 1 core evolver were killed by it. Evan muttered in a shocked voice, not knowing what to say. Yes, I helped Claire to break free from the restrictions of the world domain, because I wanted her to kill this eldritch creature. Can't you kill it yourself or close the void crack just like how you closed the crack earlier? The Essence Corridor is located between the boundary of Utopia and the world domain. Due to Utopia's influence, my control over the Essence Corridor is limited, and I cannot close that void rift on my own. Evan pondered for a moment after hearing the spirit and asked after some time, was there a special reason you chose Claire for this task? That eldritch creature is hidden inside a void crack where normal core evolvers cannot easily enter. I chose Claire because I thought she would be able to deal with it using her spiritual power without even entering the void crack. But alas, things did not go as I expected. Although that eldritch creature was a rank 1 creature, it turned out to be someone who also specialized in spiritual attacks. When Claire used her spiritual skill to attack it, she received a backlash, and her soul was damaged as a result. The eldritch creature took advantage of her soul injury, and shattered her soul into 2 parts, using one of its spiritual skills. The spirit paused after saying this and spoke after a moment. When Jer's soul shattered, I used what little control I had over the essence corridor, and sent a part of her soul, along with her physical body to Utopia. Meanwhile, the second part of her soul was sucked inside the void crack where the eldritch creature was staying. If I'm not wrong, through the void crack that part of Claire's soul arrived in your world, and by coincidence took over the body of a phantom cat. Evan was stunned when he heard the spirit of the tower and looked at Hana, who was in his arms, in amazement. After looking at Hana for a few seconds, Evan looked back at the golden orb and shook his head. I understand what you are saying, but why should I help you kill that eldritch creature? I mean, Claire was a rank 2 core evolver, but she was still not able to kill that creature. I am just an S ranker, and I don't think I have enough power to kill that eldritch creature. I am sorry, but I don't want to take this unnecessary risk for no reason. Evan is no fool. Due to his fight against the eldritch creature in the dungeon, and knowing about Gobu's abilities, he knows that eldritch creatures are not easy to deal with. Although he is powerful, he is not confident enough to be able to kill a creature who defeated Claire, who was a rank 2 evolver. The spirit of the tower remained silent, hearing Evan. After a moment, the golden orb shook a bit, and it said something that chilled Evan's heart. If you help me kill that eldritch creature, I'll make sure you don't die during your core evolution process. Chapter 686. What do you mean you will make sure I don't die during my core evolution process? Evan's heart skipped a beat when he heard the spirit of the Tower of Ascension. Although he already had an idea of what the spirit was talking about, he still wanted to know more about it. You are not a normal core evolver. I can sense that there are 2 cores within your body. Since the day I came into existence, billions of people have used the Tower of Ascension, but I have never seen anyone with 2 cores. The spirit of the tower said, and it continued. Once someone passes through the essence corridor, and all of their mana turns into world essence, they will reach the last floor of the tower, which is the core evolution room. In the core evolution room, their prime core will evolve according to their life experience. According to their life experience, Evan muttered when he heard the spirit of the tower, and thought about Nate and the other people of the Dark Guild, who wanted to kill all the humans in Aurora World in order to evolve their prime core into the demon core. Once you enter the core evolution room, your prime core will also evolve according to your life experience. But I am not sure about your second core. Generally speaking, it should have been impossible for someone to have 2 cores, so I don't know what will happen in the core evolution room once your cores start to evolve. Evan fell deep into thought hearing the spirit. I have 2 cores because of my monic physique, so I don't think there should be any danger to my life because of this, he thought, and looked back at the golden orb. Do you know anything about the monic physiques? He asked the spirit of the tower. I do have some information about the monic physiques, but your case is completely different than what I know about the monic physiques. According to my memories, even the monic physique holders only have 1 core. Even monic physique holders only have 1 core. When Evan heard the spirit of the tower, he was shocked, as he had always thought that all monic physique holders had 2 cores just like him. Yes, unlike normal people who are born with their prime core, the monic physique holders are born with their monic core, so they don't have prime core. But you, the spirit of the Tower of Ascension, was also baffled because of Evan's situation and doesn't know what to say. Evan was lost for words after hearing the spirit of the Tower of Ascension, and just stood there with a dazed look on his face. After a moment, Evan sighed and rubbed his eyebrows. Do you think my life would be in danger because of 2 cores? Yes, the spirit of the tower replied after a moment of silence. Why are you saying that my life will be in danger because of 2 cores? The core evolution room of the tower is a place suitable for the evolution of the prime core, but I don't know how your monic core will react after coming in contact with the evolution room. There is a very high chance that it will reject the evolution energy of the core evolution room, and something will go wrong with your core evolution. Damn it, Evan cursed hearing the spirit of the tower, and felt a headache. He rubbed his eyebrows and thought about the thing that the spirit of the tower wanted him to do. Do I really have to fight against an eldritch creature who even shattered the soul of a rank 2 core evolver? Evan thought inwardly and felt like beating the spirit of the tower. He was just an S-ranker, but this spirit wants him to kill an eldritch creature who is on the cusp of becoming a rank 2 creature and could already kill someone like Claire. After thinking about everything, Evan looked at the golden orb and asked in a deep voice, "If I successfully defeat that eldritch creature, then how are you going to help me during my core evolution?" Hearing Evan's words, the golden orb in front of him moved a little, and a small paper came out of it. If you feel that your monic core is not responding positively, after coming in contact with the energy of the core evolution room, use this dimensional charm to separate your monic core from the energy of the core evolution room. The spirit of the tower said, and the small paper floated in front of Evan. Evan grabbed the small paper, and its details appeared in front of him. / dimensional creation charm, S rank. Using this charm, you can create a small dimension of 5 × 5 centimeters to isolate the space from the outside world. Evan raised an eyebrow after reading the details of the S rank charm that the spirit of the tower gave him. Using this charm, you will be able to isolate your monic core from the energy of the room of the core evolution. Once your prime core successfully evolves and you leave the evolution room, you can stop using this charm, and your monic core will return to normal. Evan looked at the charm in his hand with a deep frown on his face. I hope I won't have to use this thing because I really want to evolve both of my cores. Evan thought and looked at the golden orb in front of him. Tell me everything about this eldritch creature. Around 1 hour later, the spirit of the tower told Evan everything about the eldritch creature, and he was ready to leave. I will teleport you inside the essence corridor. Evan took a deep breath and nodded his head, hearing the spirit of the Tower of Ascension. When the spirit of the Tower of Ascension saw Evan nodding his head, a bright light erupted from it. The light coming out from the golden orb covered Evan, and his body started to become transparent. Be careful, the spirit of the tower said, and with a flash, Evan disappeared from the White Room. Chapter 687. Upon being teleported away by the spirit of the Tower of Ascension, Evan found himself standing in a wide corridor. The corridor was filled with rich world essence, and was illuminated by small motes of light that looked like fireflies. Feeling the rich energy around him, Evan took a deep breath and felt his entire body being rejuvenated by the world essence. The density of world essence in this corridor is hundreds of times greater than that of the world domain, Evan muttered, looking around him. After taking a good look around him, Evan glanced into the deeper area of the corridor. According to the spirit of the tower, the essence corridor is 10,000 meters long, and each time I cover a distance of 100 meters here, 1% of my mana will transform into world essence, Evan said with a pondering look on his face, and narrowed his eyes. From what the spirit of the tower said, the eldritch creature is hiding in the middle of the corridor. Currently, around 16% of my mana already turned into world essence. If what the spirit of the tower said is true, then around 65% of my mana will turn into world essence before I reach the place where the eldritch creature is living, Evan said, and took a step forward. As Evan took a step forward, the motes of light that were illuminating the essence corridor rushed towards him and went inside his body. As the motes of light went inside his body, Evan noticed his mana started to turn into world essence. Although he already expected this, Evan was still surprised when he noticed how fast his mana was turning into world essence. Evan continued to move forward, and when he covered a distance of 100 meters, he suddenly felt a rush of energy within his body, and 1% of his mana turned into world essence. With this 1% of world essence, now 17% of his mana turned into world essence. Evan stopped for a moment when the essence corridor turned 1% of his mana into world essence, and examined the essence that was forming within his body. Once he carefully examined the world essence that was forming within his body, Evan couldn't help but frown. Although the quality of this world essence is better than the world essence provided by the essence condensing pills, it is still worse than the world essence that formed within my body. Because of the rune of evolution, Evan said with a frown on his face, after seeing the quality of the newly formed world essence. He looked at the world essence in his body for a few more minutes and sighed. Well, it seems like I will have to look for some pills or potions to refine my world essence in the future, Evan muttered, and once again moved forward. Around 5 minutes later, Evan covered a distance of 1,500 meters, and the total amount of world essence within his core exceeded 30%. The moment the amount of world essence within his core exceeded 30%, Evan noticed the world essence left his prime core and started to flow all over his body. Evan was not surprised when he noticed this, because he already knew the world essence of the core evolvers flows all over their bodies. As the world essence started to flow from his core, it created a world essence channel within his body that connected all of his body parts with his core, strengthening his physical powers greatly. Evan felt a surge of energy rushing inside his body when the world essence channel was created, and all cells within his body started to brim with vitality. Now I understand why the physical difference between a rank 1 core evolver and an S ranker is so great, Evan muttered when he felt the changes that the world essence channel brought within his body. With the establishment of the world essence channel, Evan felt that his physical strength was now even stronger than that of a newly promoted rank 1 core evolver even without using any of his skills. I wonder what level my physical strength will reach once all of my mana turns into world essence, and my core successfully evolves to the next level, Evan said to himself in a voice full of anticipation, and moved forward once again. Soon, Evan covered a distance of 4,900 meters in the Essence Corridor and finally noticed the thing that he was looking for. The Essence Corridor was tens of kilometers wide, and it was difficult for people to notice the void crack where the eldrich creature was living unless they passed by from the area where the void crack was located. But because of the instructions of the spirit of the tower, and his understanding of the void energy, it was not difficult for Evan to find the void crack, where the eldritch creature was staying. This void crack is smaller than I expected, Evan muttered as he looked at the 50 centimeters wide void crack in front of him. The edges of the void cracks were corroded by the eldritch energy, and it was preventing it from closing. According to the spirit of the tower, this eldritch creature ignores most of the people, and only attacks those who pass through the area near the void crack, Evan said, and rubbed his chin. This eldritch creature is inside the void crack, so I will also have to use my spiritual power if I want to fight against it. Although Evan knew a few things about the conceptual energy of the void, he was still far from being able to enter a void crack and fight against someone in the void. The spirit of the tower asked me to deal with this eldritch creature, and I don't need to kill it if I want to solve this problem, Evan said, after looking at the void crack for a few minutes, and his eyes turned sharp. I just need to do something about the eldritch energy that is preventing the void crack from closing, and this problem will be solved on its own once the crack is closed. As Evan said this, an idea suddenly came into his mind. He took a deep breath and took a step forward, moving towards the void crack, using his flicker step skill. Chapter 688. Flicker step. Evan used his flicker step skill and took a step forward. As he took a step forward, his appearance started to change. Deep orange flames appeared around him, his height increased to 210 cm, and his body turned completely black. His eyes turned deep red, and a powerful aura burst forth from his body. Shadow possession, Evan muttered, and along with flicker step, used the shadow possession skill to merge himself with Asher. It was the first time Evan had merged himself with Asher using the shadow possession skill, and he was shocked because of the power that was surging within his body after merging with Asher. Because of the flicker step and the boost provided by the shadow possession skill, Evan appeared in front of the void crack in an instant. The eldritch creature who was sleeping within the void crack obviously noticed the energy fluctuations the moment Evan used his shadow possession and flicker step skill, and was jolted awake. Although it woke up as soon as it felt the energy fluctuations, it was still not fast enough to respond to Evan's attack. The moment Evan arrived in front of the void crack, his spiritual power moved. Without holding back even an ounce of his spiritual power, Evan activated the Soul Needle artifact with all of his strength. Soul Needle, rank 1 high-grade spiritual artifact. A spiritual artifact that can directly attack the soul of the target. Before using this artifact, the user has to refine it using their spiritual power. During the 1 month time that Evan spent in World Domain in order to wait for the cooldown time for his authority to end, he had refined the Soul Needle with his spiritual power, and could now use it freely. Evan's spiritual power was already comparable to a peak rank 1 core evolver even without using the shadow possession skill, and now that he had merged himself with Asher, who was also at the peak of rank 1. Evan's spiritual power was already stronger than a newly promoted rank 2 core evolver. Although it might still be a bit weaker than Claire after she broke through to rank 2 as she was specialized in spiritual attacks, Evan still believed that he would be able to at least injure the eldritch creature using the soul needle, even if his spiritual power was weaker than Claire. Some people might be wondering how Evan could use his spiritual power to injure the eldritch creature if his spiritual power was weaker than Claire's. The reason Evan thought that he would be able to injure the eldritch creature was because he knew that the eldritch creature was specialized in spiritual attacks. Meanwhile, when Claire attacked it, she was not aware of this fact. Because of not knowing about this fact, she did not use all of her spiritual power when she attacked the eldritch creature, thinking that she would be able to kill it even without using her full spiritual power. After all, it was just a rank 1 creature, and she was at the rank 2. But Evan didn't care about the rank of the eldritch creature. Although it was just a rank 1 creature, he didn't hold back even a little bit, and used all of his spiritual power to strengthen the soul needle. Evan felt a bit dizzy because of using all of his spiritual power in order to strengthen the soul needle. The moment all of Evan's spiritual power was drained, a small needle shot out from the center of his eyebrows. The small needle was releasing a sharp spiritual aura, making one's soul shudder in fear. The moment the soul needle went inside the void crack, a strange painful voice that was filled with spiritual power came out from it. Cough. Evan coughed out a mouthful of blood when the painful voice of the eldritch creature that was filled with spiritual power reached his ears. K. The spiritual power of this eldritch creature is off the charts. Evan cursed inwardly when he realized even the voice of the eldritch creature was filled with spiritual power. If he was in normal condition, he would have easily defended himself against such a spiritual attack. But now his spiritual power was completely dried up as he had used up all of his spiritual power in the soul needle. Because of the spiritual voice of the eldritch creature, Evan's vision turned blurry. Although his vision turned a little blurry because of the spiritual attack of the eldritch creature, Evan was sure that the creature was definitely injured because of the soul needle, and it was his best chance to close the void crack. Ignoring the headache he was feeling because of his low spiritual energy, Evan looked at the void crack and noticed the eldritch energy that was covering the crack thinned out a lot. Although the eldritch energy thinned out a lot, it is still not enough, Evan said with an ugly look on his face when he noticed the eldritch energy around the edges of the void crack. I need to do something so that the eldritch creature stop using its energy to maintain the void crack, Evan muttered, and was about to attack again when something unexpected happened. The eldritch creature once again used the same spiritual attack that it used earlier. Cough. Evan's mind went blank for a split second because of the lack of spiritual energy, and he once again coughed out blood. Before he could recover from the attack, whoosh, a deformed hand came out of the void crack and hit him right on the chest. Boom. A booming sound echoed out, and Evan was sent flying backwards in the essence corridor, as if he had been hit by a truck. Evan spat out a large amount of blood in mid-air and felt his head spinning. Although his head was spinning because of the lack of spiritual power, Evan gritted his teeth and balanced himself in mid-air. After regaining his balance, he quickly looked towards the void crack. But the moment he looked at the void crack, Evan's face turned pale, because he saw some deformed limbs were coming out of the void crack and were widening it, so that the eldritch creature could leave the crack and enter the essence corridor. K. I shouldn't have used all of my spiritual power in that attack earlier, Evan cursed when he noticed the eldritch creature was coming out of the void crack. Although Evan did not know how powerful the eldritch creature was, he at least knew that in his current condition, there was no way he would be able to resist the spiritual attacks of this eldritch creature, whose soul is far stronger than even a normal rank 2 core evolver's. Chapter 689. As Evan watched the eldritch creature try to come out of the void crack, his face paled, and he remembered what the spirit of the tower had said to him when it told him about the eldritch creature. The essence corridor is located between the boundaries of the world domain and Utopia. If you use powerful attacks inside the essence corridor and destroy its space barrier, you will be lost between the void of the world domain and Utopia. As the words of the spirit of the tower rang inside his mind, Evan gritted his teeth, and despite feeling dizzy because of his low spiritual energy, shot towards the void crack. I can't allow this bastard to come out, or it will be a disaster if we fight here. And the space of the corridor collapses, Evan thought inwardly, and deep orange fire appeared around his body. The conceptual energy of fire, which he could use due to the shadow possession skill, moved, and a sword made of dark orange fire appeared in his hand. Using his high agility, Evan appeared near the void crack in an instant, and used the fire sword to cut down the deformed limbs of the eldritch creature, which were trying to widen the void crack, so that it could come out of it. The eldritch creature once again used the spiritual attacks when Evan cut off many of its limbs. But using all of his willpower, Evan ignored the headache that he was feeling because of the spiritual attacks, and continued to chop off its limbs. It is good that the soul of the eldritch creature was severely injured, because of the soul needle. Otherwise, with its overwhelming spiritual power, it would have been able to shatter my soul with just a few of its attacks, just like how it shattered Claire's soul. Evan thought inwardly, and continued to cut down the limbs of the creature, so that it couldn't increase the size of the void crack. The limbs of eldritch creature were covered in the eldritch energy, and were as hard as steel, but under the burning power of the fire sword, Evan chopped them like he was cutting the wood blocks with an axe. Suddenly, the eldritch creature used another of its spiritual attack. At first, Evan ignored the attack and continued to cut down the limbs of the creature, but when this attack struck him, his expression changed because he realized the power of this attack was at least 2 times stronger than its previous attacks. Cough. Evan was already having a hard time because of ignoring a few of its earlier spiritual attacks, so when he suddenly received a more powerful spiritual attack, he coughed out blood, and lost focus for a split second. The moment Evan lost focus, the size of the void crack suddenly increased, and a beam of eldritch energy came out of it, going straight towards Evan's chest, where his heart was located. All the hairs on Evan's body stood up to no end when the beam of the eldritch energy came out of the void crack, and a sense of impending doom engulfed his body. Although he was feeling dizzy due to the eldritch creature's spiritual attack, he still subconsciously tilted his body to the side to avoid the attack. Poochie. Even though Evan moved his body sideways at the last second, the beam of the eldritch energy still pierced his shoulder. The power of the eldritch energy was so high that although Evan was merged with Asher, the beam still made a see-through hole in his shoulder. A stream of blood erupted from Evan's shoulder, and he groaned in pain. Whoosh! Before Evan could recover from the attack, more limbs of the eldritch creature came out of the void crack, and began to widen it. As the size of the void crack increased, Evan noticed a pair of 4 deep green eyes looking at him from inside the crack. The 4 eyes were filled with coldness, and just by looking into them, Evan felt his soul shudder a bit. How can the soul of a rank 1 creature be so strong? Evan muttered in a shocked voice when he felt his soul shake a bit, just by looking into the eyes of the eldritch creature. As Evan watched the size of the crack increase rapidly, a pained expression appeared on his face, and he sighed. Looks like I will have to use that, he said inwardly, and with a reluctant expression on his face, took out a small white-colored bead from his shadow storage. I thought I would keep these as my trump cards, in case I encounter any dangerous situation after reaching Utopia. But now that the situation come to this, Evan muttered to himself, while looking at the small white bead in his hands. The small white bead was the ability bead that Noir gave him when he had left for the dungeon town to clear the dungeon. If possible, he did not want to use the ability bead, but looking at the situation, he knew that he had no choice but to use the ability bead given to him by Noir, because only this bead could stop the eldritch creature from coming out of the void crack without damaging the space barrier of the essence corridor. While Evan took out the ability bead from his shadow storage and recovered from the eldritch creature's spiritual attack, the void crack turned 2 meters in size, and a long green face with a giant head similar to that of an alien came out of it. The moment the face of the eldritch creature came out, it opened its mouth, showing hundreds of sharp teeth, and planned to use another spiritual attack. But before it could use its spiritual attack, Evan crushed the white ability bead that he was holding. Just as Evan crushed the ability bead, a 3 meters tall phantom image of Noir appeared behind him, looking at the eldritch creature without any emotion on her face. After appearing, she pointed one of her fingers at the eldritch creature, and spiritual power surged within the essence corridor. As Noir was a phantom cat specialized in spiritual attacks, the skill that she sealed inside the ability bead was also a spiritual skill. Feeling the spiritual power coming from Noir's phantom image, The eldritch creature panicked and tried to return back into the void crack. If it was in its perfect condition, the eldritch creature wouldn't have cared about this spiritual attack after all. It even withstood Claire's spiritual attack, who was a rank 2 core evolver. But the problem was that currently the soul of the eldritch creature was seriously damaged, due to the soul needle Evan had used earlier, and it wasn't in condition to take another powerful spiritual attack head-on. The only reason it was aggressively attacking Evan was because it could feel that Evan's spiritual power was completely depleted, and he could not use another spiritual attack like before. But the eldritch creature never had thought that Evan would have an ability bead containing a spiritual attack type skill. When Evan noticed the eldritch creature wanted to go back into the void crack after feeling the spiritual power fluctuations coming from Noir's phantom image, he snorted and took Adam's gravity manipulation skill to solidify the space around the eldritch creature in order to halt its movements. The eldritch creature was stunned when the space around it suddenly hardened, and it wasn't able to move. A panicked look flashed on its strange face, and it used the eldritch energy in order to break free from the effect of gravity manipulation skill. But before the eldritch creature could break free from the restrictions of the gravity manipulation skill, soul torment, an indifferent voice came from the mouth of Noir's phantom image, and a ray emerged from the finger with which she was pointing towards the eldritch creature. The beam struck the head of the eldritch creature and went inside its body, directly attacking its soul. The eldritch creature screamed in agony, and green blood started to flow out from its 4 eyes. After launching the attack, the phantom image of Noir disappeared. Evan ignored the miserable scream of the eldritch creature and shot towards it the moment it was struck by Noir's attack. Using his high agility, he arrived in front of eldritch creature's face in an instant. The small amount of spiritual power that he had recovered in this short period of time moved, and Evan opened his mouth. "Soul severance," he said, and felt a terrible headache because all of his spiritual power was once again depleted. Soul severance. After activating this skill, the user can sever the connection between a person's body and soul for 1 second using their spiritual power, rendering them unconscious or temporarily incapacitated. Although Evan lost all of his spiritual power once again and felt a terrible headache, the result of the soul severance was imminent. Normally, it would have been impossible for Evan to affect the eldritch creature without using all of his spiritual power. But because of the effect of Noir's attack, soul severance skill successfully severed the connection between the soul and the physical body of the eldritch creature. The moment the connection between the soul and the physical body of the eldritch creature was severed, the eldritch energy that was preventing the void crack from closing disappeared. Sonic resonance. Before the eldritch creature could recover the connection between its soul and physical body, Evan struck its giant head with his fist, sending it flying back deep inside the void crack. Now is my chance. The moment the eldritch creature was sent flying deep inside the void crack, Evan's eyes turned sharp. Now that the eldritch creature was deep inside the void and no eldritch energy was preventing the crack from closing, Evan could finally close it. The conceptual energy of the void inside Evan's body moved, and he brought his hand in front of the void crack. Void break. Using the first void skill that he had created, Evan shattered the space around the void crack and created a void rift. The moment the void rift appeared, the void crack where the eldritch creature was living merged with the void rift, and Evan could now control the entire void rift using the void energy present inside his body. A split second after Evan shattered the space and took control of the void crack, he stopped using his void energy. The moment Evan stopped using the void energy, the void rift that he created using the void break skill started to close down at a rapid speed. Seeing the void rift was closing at a rapid speed, although Evan was feeling dizzy because of the lack of spiritual energy, a smile still appeared on his face. But the smile on Evan's face stiffened when he suddenly heard the angry scream of the eldritch creature and felt it coming towards the void rift at rapid speed. "This bastard," Evan cursed when he felt the eldritch creature rushing towards the void rift, and shot tens of fireballs and fire spears inside the void rift in order to stop the creature. The eldritch creature screamed in pain when it was struck by the fireballs and fire spears, and its speed slowed down. The void rift continued to shrink, and soon it was just 10 centimeters wide. Whoosh! Just when Evan thought the void rift would be closed, a deformed hand came out of it and tried to stop it from closing. Evan was already having a hard time because of the lack of spiritual power, So when he saw the deformed arm of the eldritch creature, which was trying to stop the void rift from closing, his eyes turned ice cold, and he cut down the arm of the eldritch creature using the fire sword in his hand. Or the eldritch creature screamed in pain and tried to send another arm out of the rift to stop it from closing. But before its arm could come out, the void rift closed. The moment the void rift closed, the spirit of the Tower of Ascension used the small control it had over the essence corridor and reinforced the space barrier around the place where the void rift was a moment ago. Evan ignored the energy that was reinforcing the space barrier and dropped to the ground once the rift was closed. Finally, I can leave this place and go to the core evolution room, Evan muttered as he fell to the ground and closed his eyes. Chapter 690. It is good that I retrieved the soul needle when I used the sonic resonance to punch that bastard, otherwise it would have been lost in the void, Evan muttered, looking at the small needle in his hand. With a thought, he controlled the soul needle, and it disappeared from his hand, returning to his soul space. The soul needle was a spiritual artifact, and he had refined it using his spiritual power. Because of refining it using his spiritual power, Evan could store it within his soul space. After putting the soul needle back into his soul space, Evan stood up and looked at the place where the void crack used to be. It had been 3 hours since Evan closed the void crack. The spirit of the tower used its control over the essence corridor, and now the space barrier around the area where the void crack used to be was tens of times more powerful than before. Let's see if that bastard is still here or not, Evan said to himself and used his spiritual senses. After using his spiritual senses, he used the void energy that he had recovered in the past 3 hours, and used the void skill that he comprehended when his understanding of the void energy reached 10%. As Evan used the void energy, his spiritual senses suddenly became much sharper, and like a hot knife passing through the butter, his spiritual senses passed through the space barrier and entered the void. The moment Evan's spiritual senses entered the void, a small smile appeared on his face. Although the consumption of the spiritual energy is quite high, it is still better than when I used the void study skill through the boots of Voyager, Evan said. Once his spiritual senses entered the void, Evan was about to look for the eldritch creature once his spiritual senses entered the void, but before he could look for it, a powerful spiritual pressure filled the void. He heard the voice of the eldritch creature and noticed it was about to use a spiritual skill to destroy his spiritual senses. Seeing the eldritch creature wanted to destroy his spiritual senses, Evan felt a chill running down his spine, and he immediately withdrew his spiritual senses from the void. F***K, if I had been a moment too late my soul would have been seriously injured, Evan said after withdrawing his spiritual senses from the void, and wiped the cold sweat that covered his forehead. It seems this eldritch creature is still trying to break the space barrier of the essence corridor, Evan said after a moment, but did not care too much about it. His task was to close the void crack, and he had already completed it. If the eldritch creature broke the space barrier of the essence corridor in the future, it has nothing to do with him. Now that the problem of the eldritch creature is solved, I just hope that nothing will go wrong during the evolution of my core. Evan started to move deeper into the essence corridor. As he moved deeper into the essence corridor, the motes of light that filled the corridor rushed inside his body, and his mana continued to turn into world essence. Around 16% of Evan's mana had already turned into world essence even before he entered the Tower of Ascension, so when Evan crossed the distance of 8,500 meters within the essence corridor, all of his mana turned into world essence. The moment all of his mana turned into world essence, Evan felt a cool sensation all over his body, and the essence channel that was created when his world essence exceeded 30% finally solidified within his body. Once the essence channel solidified, Evan's body stopped absorbing the motes of light that filled the essence corridor. Just when Evan thought now there was no need for him to stay in the essence corridor anymore, the rune of evolution that was engraved on his chest lit up and started to absorb the motes of light that filled the essence corridor. Evan was stunned when the rune of evolution started to absorb the motes of light and didn't understand what was happening, but soon his stunned expression turned into that of joy as he noticed the rune of evolution was using the motes of light that it was absorbing to refine his world essence, increasing its quality. I never thought that the rune of evolution would have such an effect on my world essence, Evan muttered to himself, and decided to stay in the essence corridor as long as possible to increase the quality of his world essence. But just after 10 minutes, the rune of evolution suddenly stopped glowing and returned to normal. Evan was stunned when the rune of evolution stopped refining his world essence, and looked at it in confusion. Why did it stop refining my world essence? Evan asked himself and scanned his body. But even after scanning his body, he did not find anything strange, and did not understand why the rune of evolution stopped refining his world essence. When he did not find anything strange, Evan shook his head and continued to move deeper into the essence corridor. Although the quality of my world essence that was formed after entering the tower is still lower than the quality of the world essence that was formed through the rune of evolution, it is at least better than before after this little improvement. Since his mana had already transformed into world essence, Evan covered the remaining distance in the essence corridor in a matter of seconds. The moment Evan reached the end of the essence corridor, he noticed a small formation there. Evan was not surprised when he saw the formation, because the spirit of the tower had already told him about it. Seeing the formation, Evan took a deep breath and stood in the middle of it. "Let's hope everything will go smoothly in the core evolution room," he muttered, and with a flash, disappeared from the essence corridor. Chapter 691. Upon being teleported away by the formation of the essence corridor, Evan found himself standing in a small room. The small room was empty and there was nothing inside it. "Is this the core evolution room the spirit of the tower told me about?" Evan muttered in a doubtful voice after seeing the empty room, as he could not feel any kind of energy within the room that could help him evolve his core. As Evan was looking around the room with a confused expression on his face, the floor of the room suddenly lit up. Evan raised an eyebrow when he saw the floor of the room was shining, and a strange energy was flooding beneath the ground. "Don't tell me there is another eldrich creature hiding below the floor of this room," Evan muttered with an ugly look on his face, as he felt a surge of energy coming from beneath the floor of the room. The world essence within his body began to move, and he was ready to attack any time. As Evan was getting ready to fight, the energy that was moving beneath the floor of the room started to come out and started to take the shape of a formation. Seeing it was not an eldritch creature, Evan relaxed and looked at the formation that was forming on the ground, with a confused look on his face. In just 1 minute, half of the room floor was covered in the formation, and just by looking at it, Evan could feel his prime core was shaking as if urging him to stand on it. Although his prime core was shaking in excitement, Evan didn't immediately step on the formation, and looked at it for a few more minutes. After looking at it for a few more minutes, a strange expression appeared on Evan's face. "Why does this formation look similar to Rune of Evolution?" Evan suddenly muttered, looking at the rune that was engraved on his chest. "The function of this formation is to evolve my core, and the Rune of Evolution is also related to the evolution. Maybe there is a connection between this formation and my Rune of Evolution," Evan thought inwardly. But he wasn't sure about his guess after all. His knowledge regarding the Rune of Evolution was very vague. "Forget it. For now, the most important thing is to evolve both of my cores," Evan said after a moment, and took out the dimensional creation charm that the spirit of the tower had given him. "I hope I don't have to use it." Evan took a deep breath and stepped on the formation, while holding the dimensional creation charm close to his heart, so that he could use it in case of danger. The moment Evan stepped on the formation, a bright light erupted from it. Evan was forced to close his eyes when the bright light erupted, and when he opened them again, he saw the formation was now enclosed in a cylindrical-shaped barrier. "Why is there a barrier here?" Evan raised an eyebrow when he noticed the barrier, and started to feel uneasy for some reason. "I was thinking about leaving the formation if something goes wrong with my cores, but now that it is surrounded by this barrier," Evan muttered, and wasn't sure if he could leave this barrier using his shadow walk skill. As Evan was getting anxious, a strange energy started to come out from the formation. The strange energy that came out of the formation started to fill the surroundings, and the cylindrical-shaped barrier stopped this energy from leaving the area of the formation. The moment the strange energy came out of the formation, Evan's prime core started to shake in excitement. Evan quickly sat down when he felt the excitement of his prime core, and closed his eyes in order to feel the energy around him more clearly. As soon as Evan closed his eyes after sitting down, the energy emanating from the formation rushed towards him. The energy went inside his body, and similar to how he used to refine the energy of the monster cores, Evan guided the energy of the formation towards his prime core. When the energy of the formation came into contact with his prime core started to absorb it like a black hole. While absorbing the energy, Evan was very cautious, and was monitoring his monic core all the time. But to his surprise, nothing strange happened with his morch core, and his prime core continued to absorb the energy of the formation. Just like this, 10 hours passed in the blink of an eye. During these 10 hours, Evan's prime core was continuously absorbing the energy of the formation, and Evan could feel that it was just a step away from evolving to the next level. Another hour later, Evan's prime core suddenly stopped absorbing the energy of the formation. Evan frowned when his prime core suddenly stopped absorbing energy, as it still needed to absorb a little more energy before it could evolve. Evan sent the energy of the formation towards his prime core, but his prime core rejected all the energy, and did not absorb it. Seeing his prime core was not absorbing the energy of the formation, a bad feeling began to grow in Evan's heart. What is going on? I can feel that I just need to absorb a little more energy, and I can evolve my prime core, but why is my prime core rejecting the energy? Evan thought and once again sent the energy of the formation towards his prime core. As Evan sent the energy of the formation towards his prime core, his monic core suddenly started to rotate. Evan's expression changed when he noticed the change in his monic core, and he immediately tried to stop the energy that he had sent towards his prime core. But to his shock, a suction force suddenly erupted from his monic core, and the energy of the formation started to rush towards it on its own, and the moment the energy of the formation came into contact with his monic core, Evan's face paled as he felt a sharp pain radiate from his core. Chapter 692. The moment the energy of the formation came into contact with Evan's monic core, his face turned pale as he felt a sharp pain radiate from his core. Just as he felt the sharp pain coming from his core, the rotating speed of his core slowed down, and it exhaled all the energy of the formation that it had absorbed just a second ago. Once the rotating speed of his core slowed down, the energy of the formation stopped rushing towards his core, and the pain that Evan was feeling began to subside. About a minute later, Evan's monic core stopped rotating completely and returned to normal. Evan sighed in relief when his monic core returned to normal, and the pain that was coming from it completely disappeared. But soon his expression turned ugly because he noticed that along with his monic core, his prime core also stopped absorbing the energy of the formation. His prime core was just a step away from evolving to the next stage, but it was not absorbing the energy of the formation for some reason. Could it be that both of my cores need to evolve at the same time, but the energy of this formation is not suitable for the evolution of my monic core, which is why my prime core is also not evolving? Evan muttered with a deep frown on his face. If my guess is correct, then my prime core will not evolve until I find a way to evolve my monic core along with it. Evan felt a headache just thinking about his situation. If he can't evolve his cores, he will not be able to become a rank 1 core evolver. Even if I leave the core evolution room and use the source pill that the people at Utopia use to evolve their prime core, I don't think it will work for me, Evan muttered in a low voice, as he was 100% certain that similar to the energy of formation, the source pill would also not be able to evolve his prime core, unless he found a way to evolve his monic core. What the FU*K should I do now? Evan cursed and rubbed his eyebrows. After a minute, he hesitated a bit, but soon a resolved look appeared on his face. Although it might be dangerous, this is the only thing that I can try now, Evan muttered, and took a deep breath to clear his mind. After clearing his mind from any useless thoughts, he closed his eyes and once again drew the energy of the formation inside his body. Just as the energy of the formation entered his body, his monic core started to rotate again, and similar to before, the energy of the formation rushed towards it. FU*K. The moment the energy came into contact with his core, Evan gritted his teeth as he once again felt a sharp pain, as if someone was pricking a needle in his heart, where his monic core was located. Just like before, his core tried to exhale the energy of the formation, as if it was spitting out something rotten. But Evan ignored the pain that he was feeling, and used his control over the monic core and tried to refine the energy. When he tried to refine the energy, the rotation speed of his monic core suddenly increased, and he felt his heart was being torn apart. Cold sweat appeared on Evan's forehead. and he nearly lost control over his core, allowing it to exhale the energy of the formation. Fortunately, just before his core could spit out the energy of the formation, Evan once again regained control over it, and continued to try to refine the energy, so that his monic core could also evolve. Although Evan knew that the thing he was doing was dangerous, and might even cause damage to his monic core, he had no option but to do this. He was holding the dimensional creation charm near his heart, so that he could use it immediately, if he noticed any danger. 5 minutes later, when his monic core absorbed a large amount of energy from the formation, Evan was at his limit, as his core was not refining the energy, and this energy was simply flooding his core from the inside, putting a lot of pressure on the heart. It seems this is not going to work, Evan muttered while gritting his teeth, and was about to stop absorbing the energy, because of the pressure he was feeling, when his core suddenly showed a change. Once his monic core was almost full of formation energy, the rotation speed of his core suddenly increased. Along with its rotating speed, the pain Evan was feeling also increased, and his heart started to beat at the speed of the bullet train. The energy waves that were coming out from his core started to affect his heart, and Evan felt as if his heart would burst at any moment. Damn it, Evan gritted his teeth and continued to send more energy towards his core despite feeling the sharp pain. As more energy flowed inside his monic core, its rotation speed continued to increase. After a few seconds, Evan's monic core finally started to refine the energy, and its rank that was stuck at S started to move towards the rank 1. Although his core started to refine the energy and showed signs of advancing, Evan didn't show any kind of joy, and his face was pale white. F***K, my heart will definitely burst at this rate, Evan cursed while gritting his teeth, and decided to stop sending the energy of the formation towards his core. Although he wanted to evolve his core, he was sure that his heart would definitely burst if he didn't slow down the rotating speed of his core. Just when Evan was about to stop sending the energy towards his core, a burning sensation came from his chest, and a notification that he had never seen before appeared in front of his retina. The Rune of Origin has been activated. Chapter 693. In a dimly lit ancient cave, a dragon was sleeping on a platform of shimmering gold and precious gems. Suddenly, the eyelids of the dragon moved slightly, and it opened its deep yellow eyes. A powerful pressure spread outwards in all directions the moment the dragon opened its eyes, and the entire ancient cave started to shake. Once its eyes were fully opened, for a moment strange runes flickered in them, as if the dragon was trying to sense something. After a moment, the dragon slowly lifted its massive head, its scales gleamed in hues of fiery red, and it looked in a certain direction. The 5th origin holder is finally about to appear, the dragon muttered in an indifferent voice, and a look of interest flashed in its deep yellow eyes. I wonder what kind of change we will experience this time. The dragon muttered in a low voice and once again closed its eyes, returning back to its slumber. In a faraway place, in the middle of the starry sky, stars twinkle like diamonds, casting a celestial glow upon the planets below. Expanse, galaxies swirl in a mesmerizing dance, casting ethereal hues across the star-strewn firmament. Amid the beautiful scenery of the starry sky that could mesmerize anyone, a giant who was thousands of meters big was sleeping soundlessly, floating like an asteroid. The giant was bald, had a big pot belly and an innocent-looking face. As the giant was sleeping, its nose suddenly twitched a little as if it was smelling something, and it slowly opened its eyes. After waking up, the giant lifted its hand and rubbed its eyes. When the giant lifted its hand to rub its eyes, a powerful force swept in all directions, and a few asteroids and planets in an area of a few thousand kilometers turned into cosmic dust. A look of confusion flashed in the giant's eyes when it heard the sound of explosions, and it looked around it. After looking around it for a while, the giant's eyes turned heavy, and it went back to sleep. In an icy place that was surrounded by a raging snowstorm, the power of ice froze everything. The mountains, trees, rocks and even the dust were frozen under the ice. In the middle of this snowstorm, at the edge of the region's largest frozen hill, a girl who looked around 13 or 14 years old was sitting with a bored look on her face. Occasionally, bursts of cold energy were coming out of her body, increasing the power of the snowstorm. The river that was flowing down from the hilltop of the largest hill was frozen solid, and under the frozen river, some creatures who were releasing terrifying aura were shivering, while looking at the little girl who was sitting at the edge of the hill. The girl had light silver hair, and her eyes were deep blue in color. She was holding a sheathed sword in her hands that was slightly larger than her petty body. Suddenly, the eyes of the girl flickered a bit, and she looked in a certain direction. Looking in that direction, the bored look on the girl's face gradually disappeared, and her lips curved upward slightly. "Looks like the era of the chaos is about to begin once again," the girl muttered in a pleasant-sounding childish voice, and a look of excitement flashed in her eyes. "We will finally be able to relieve our boredom," the girl muttered and patted the sword she was holding. When the sword heard the girl's words, it started to shake in excitement, and a sharp aura that cut through the icy storm, and even penetrated the void erupted from it. The creatures who were frozen under the ice were shredded into dust when they came into contact with the sharp aura of the sword, and their life force instantly disappeared. The girl did not care about the sharp aura that was coming out of the sword, and just smiled slightly, and continued to look in a certain direction. In a dark place that was filled with dense eldrich energy, a man was sitting on a stone platform. The man had a cold look on his face, and two horns were coming out from the top of his head. The eyes of the man were deep black in color, with hints of purple in them. A sinister aura that made people's souls shudder was coming out from his body, and the surroundings of the man were completely corroded. Similar to other people, the man also suddenly sensed something, and looked in a certain direction with an indifferent look on his face. After looking in that direction for a few seconds, the man returned back to his previous posture, without showing any kind of change in his expression, as if he didn't care about the thing that he had sensed a moment ago. The Rune of Origin has been activated. Inside the core evolution room, Evan looked at the notification with a stunned expression on his face. It was the first time he had seen anything about the Rune of Origin, so he didn't immediately understand what was happening. He dropped the dimensional creation charm that he was holding, and tore the shirt he was wearing to look at the rune that was engraved on his chest. When he looked at the rune, a look of utter surprise flashed on Evan's face, because he noticed that for the first time since the rune was enraged on his chest, the second part of the rune of shining brightly. Evan was shocked when he saw the second part of the rune was shining, and a look of joy appeared on his face. "It seems this second rune can help me evolve my monic core," Evan muttered in a joyful voice. But his joy didn't last long, because just after a few seconds, crack, he heard a sound of cracking. Arg, a painful scream escaped from Evan's mouth, and his monic core started to break. Chapter 694. When Evan's prime core reached C rank, he had received Abomincer class. But because he already had Shadow Necromancer class, his Abomincer class turned into a Forbidden level class specific skill, Growth Link. Because of the Growth Link skill, a rune which was connected with his skill appeared on his chest. The rune was divided into two parts. One part of the rune was the Rune of Evolution. While Evan did not know anything about the second part, he was always curious about the second part of his rune, but because it never reacted to anything, he wasn't sure what it was. But now, looking at the second part of the rune which was shining brightly in the notification in front of him, Evan finally knows what is the second part of the rune. Rune of Origin, Evan muttered in a low voice, and noticed that the moment the Rune of Origin activated, the energy of the formation that was flooding inside his monic core started to transform into a different energy. Although Evan wasn't sure what was this energy, he could feel that this energy was far more powerful and mysterious than the energy that was coming out of the formation. Because of the energy that was flooding inside his monic core, due to the Rune of Origin, the speed at which Evan's monic core was refining the energy also increased greatly. Evan was overjoyed when the refining speed of his monic core increased, and even though he felt as if someone was cutting his heart with a sharp sword, he gritted his teeth, and continued to send more energy of the formation towards his monic core. Crack! Suddenly, Evan heard a cracking sound, and his face turned pale. Arg, he screamed in pain and noticed a small crack appeared on his monic core. F***K. Evan gritted his teeth and lost control over the energy that he was sending towards his core. Evan thought that the energy would stop flowing towards his monic core once he lost control over it. But to his shock, a suction force erupted from his monic core, and the energy of the formation rushed towards it even faster than before. Because of the sudden change, the pressure that his core was putting on his heart increased greatly, and combined with the pain that he was feeling because of the crack that just appeared on his core, Evan felt as if he was going to die. Damn it. I can't handle it. Evan grabbed the dimensional creation charm that the spirit of the Tower of Ascension gave him and brought it near his chest. Crack. Ugh. Before he could activate the charm, another crack appeared on his monic core, and Evan's eyes turned red due to pain. The light around the Rune of Origin was increasing with each passing second, and along with the light, the speed at which it was transforming the energy of the formation was also increasing. Damn it, Evan quickly crushed the dimensional creation charm after bringing it near his heart. Just as he crushed the charm, faint space ripples came out of it and went inside his body, covering his heart. Suddenly, Evan's heart became ethereal and disappeared. Along with his heart, his monic core also disappeared. Although his heart and monic core disappeared, Evan could still feel his connection with them, and could even sense the small dimension that was around his heart. Because of the small dimension, the energy of the formation wasn't able to come near his monic core, and its rotation speed started to slow down. Evan was still feeling a sharp pain because of the 2 cracks that appeared on his monic core, and his breathing was rough. If I had allowed my core to absorb more energy, it might have shattered, Evan muttered inside in relief. As Evan breathed a sigh of relief to see that his core was returning to normal, the Rune of Origin on his chest suddenly became even brighter. Just as the rune glowed, the small amount of energy that the Rune of Origin had transformed earlier, and was still within his monic core, went wild, and powerful energy waves began to flow out from his core. Rumble. The small dimension around Evan's heart trembled because of the energy waves and started to collapse. Evan's expression changed when he saw this because he wasn't sure if he would be able to survive if this small dimension shattered, and the energy of the formation once again came into contact with his monic core. While Evan was thinking, the dimension around his heart collapsed due to the energy ripples, and the energy of the formation once again rushed towards his core. Fu*K. The same sharp pain once again assaulted Evan, and his face turned pale. Crack. In just a few seconds, another crack appeared on his core, and Evan nearly lost consciousness because of the overwhelming pain. I need to get out of here. Evan gritted his teeth and tried to stand up, intending to leave the formation. Although the formation was covered by a barrier, he hoped that he would be able to leave using the shadow walk skill. Just when Evan was about to stand up, crack. Another crack appeared on his core, and even before he could scream, Evan noticed his monic core started to turn into liquid. Evan's face changed as he watched his core turn into liquid because he wasn't sure what would happen if he left the formation in his current state. If his core had been in a solid state, he could have left the formation without any concern. But now that his core had started to turn into liquid, he felt that if he left the formation now, and his core did not get the energy of the formation, it would be dangerous for him. Fu*K my life, Evan cursed and sat down in the middle of the formation once again. Crack. More and more cracks started appearing on his core, and it slowly started turning into liquid. I can't take it anymore, Evan said with a pale face when a few more cracks appeared on his core, and took out a green-colored potion from his shadow storage. Nocturnal Potion rank 1 mid-grade. A potion that grants a serene and uninterrupted sleep, ensuring the user remains peacefully unconscious for 24 hours. Evan received this potion from Noir and the others when they gave him 50% of the items in their treasure vault. At that time, Evan did not think too much about this potion, but now he was glad that they gave him this potion. After taking out the potion, he summoned Anastasia and asked her to use her life rain skill. Once Anastasia used her life rain skill, Evan drank the potion, deciding to stay unconscious during the process of his core evolution to avoid losing his mind due to pain. Just as Evan drank the potion, his vision started to turn blurry, and in just a few seconds, he dropped to the ground, unconscious. Anastasia continued to use her life rain skill, and maintained Evan's life force while he was unconscious. Just like this, 10 hours passed and Evan's monic core finally turned into complete liquid. Chapter 695. Even after Evan passed out, the Rune of Origin continued to transform the energy of the formation, and in about 10 hours, his monic core turned completely into liquid. Once Evan's monic core turned into complete liquid, the Rune of Origin stopped transforming the energy of the formation. The moment the Rune of Origin stopped transforming the energy, the normal energy of the formation rushed towards his prime core. Whoosh! Evan's prime core was just a step away from evolving to the next stage, So the moment the energy of the formation came into contact with it, his prime core started to absorb the energy like a black hole. In just 1 minute, Evan's prime core reached the boundary of the rank 1 and was about to evolve. But just as it was about to evolve to the next stage, the rune of origin that was engraved on Evan's chest once again shone. Crack. Just as the rune of origin shone, a crack appeared on Evan's prime core. Although Evan was unconscious, his body still trembled when a crack appeared on his prime core, showing just how painful it was. Anastasia continued to use the life rain skill to relieve Evan's pain, and even began to use her other healing skills. When she noticed he was trembling, and his body was drenched in cold sweat. Life Rain, unique skill. Sacrifice 90% of your stamina to call upon a gentle rain of healing droplets within an area of 100 kilometers. Each drop of rain possesses potent revitalizing properties that can heal even grave wounds. There is no cooldown time for the Life Rain skill, but once you use this skill, you won't be able to recover your stamina for the next 10 hours, no matter what. As the rune of origin shone, cracks continued to appear on Evan's prime core, and soon it was on the verge of shattering. Bang! Suddenly, a small bang resounded within Evan's body, and his prime core shattered into countless pieces. Even in the unconscious state, Evan couldn't help but scream out in pain the moment his prime core shattered. Evan's aura started to drop at rapid speed once his prime core shattered, and a small trickle of blood started to flow out from the corner of his mouth. Alicia's expression changed when she noticed Evan's aura was dropping, and she started to use all of her healing skills without stopping. But even with her healing skills, Evan's aura continued to drop, and even his life force started to weaken. Whoosh! Suddenly, the rune of origin that was shining on Evan's chest stopped glowing. Alicia was still using her healing skills when she noticed that once the rune of origin stopped shining, it started to turn into liquid. The rune of evolution didn't show any reaction, but the rune of origin turned into liquid and seeped inside Evan's body, disappearing into his chest. Once the rune of origin disappeared, the rune of evolution started to shake, and its size increased, and it covered the space of the rune of the origin as well. Now there was only rune of evolution left on Evan's chest. The liquid form of the rune of origin, that seeped inside Evan's body, reached his heart and merged with the liquid form of his monic core. Just as the liquid of the rune of origin merged with his monic core, a faint outline of the rune of origin started to appear around Evan's heart. In just a few seconds, Evan's heart was covered in the outlines of the rune of origin. Dum. Suddenly, a loud heartbeat resounded inside the core evolution room. The moment Evan's heart that was covered in the outlines of rune of origin beat, a powerful force emerged from it and flowed all over Evan's body. Evan's life force, which was continuously dropping immediately, stabilized the moment the force that came out from his heart flowed all over his body, and even his aura once again started to increase. Dum, dash. With each heartbeat, a powerful force flowed in Evan's body, and his pale complexion started to return to normal. Swish. Once Evan's aura was completely stabilized, a powerful suction force erupted from the liquid monic core. Because of the suction force of the monic core, the small fragments of the prime core started to move towards it. Evan's prime core was shattered into thousands of pieces, and all of its fragments were even smaller than the sand particles. As the tiny fragments of the prime core moved towards his monic core and merged with it, Evan's aura once again started to increase. After merging, the tiny fragments of prime core also turned into liquid, and the mass of monic core's liquid started to increase. During all this time, Evan's heart, which was covered in the outline of rune of origin, was continuously sending powerful force all over Evan's body, and his aura was increasing at a rapid speed. Even though Evan's prime core shattered and his monic core was still in liquid form, his aura was already slightly stronger than his previous aura. In around 2 hours, all the tiny fragments of the prime core merged with Evan's monic core. Once his prime core and monic core merged into one, the outline of the rune of origin that covered his heart started to shine. Whoosh! A powerful suction force came out of rune of origin, and Evan's body started to absorb the energy of the formation like a black hole. Once the energy of the formation entered Evan's body, it came into contact with the force that Evan's heart was releasing, and the energy of the formation transformed into the higher energy that turned his monic core into liquid. Once the energy of the formation transformed, it moved towards the liquid form of his monic core and was absorbed by it. The moment the energy of the formation was absorbed by his core, some notifications flashed before Evan's retina. All conditions have been fulfilled. Your monic core is evolving into the primordial monic core. Chapter 696. In Utopia, outside the portal of the Shadow Realm, many demons were still stationed here. In fact, compared to before, the number of demons stationed outside the Shadow Realm was at least 3 times greater than before. Most of them don't know what happened, but about 7 months ago, Baphomet suddenly ordered increased security around the portal of the Shadow Realm, and instructed them to capture anyone who entered the area around the portal to the Shadow Realm. As many demons were carefully keeping an eye on the surroundings, the portal of the Shadow Realm suddenly started to shake. A blood demon who was guarding the portal raised an eyebrow when he noticed the abnormality, and backed away from the portal. Should I inform Master Zagonath about this? The blood demon muttered to himself in an uncertain voice, because Zagonath, who was in charge of all the matters related to Shadow Realm, strictly told all the demons to inform him immediately if they noticed any abnormality in the portal. While the blood demon was wondering whether he should inform Zagonath about this or not, the trembling of the portal of the Shadow Realm increased even more. Strange energy fluctuations started to come out of the portal, and space around it began to shake. The energy fluctuations began to spread in the wide area, and soon other demons who were patrolling around the Shadow Realm also noticed the abnormality. In just a few minutes, many demons gathered beside the blood demon and looked at the portal of the Shadow Realm with a solemn look on their faces. "Did you inform Master Zagonath?" an extreme demon asked, looking at the blood demon who was guarding the portal. "Not yet." The blood demon shook his head hearing the extreme demon. "You should inform him as soon as possible," the extreme demon said in a heavy voice. After saying this, he looked around him carefully and said in a low voice, "I don't know if it is true or not, but I heard that last time when this portal showed this kind of abnormality, Commander Malphacer suffered a huge loss, and all the demons who were guarding the portal were wiped out." The matter regarding the fight between Malphacer and Volta was not known to many, but the demons who were guarding the portal still heard some rumors about what happened a few months ago. When the blood demon heard what the extreme demon said, his expression changed because he had also heard the rumors about how Malphacer was seriously injured in a fight, and thousands of demons who were guarding the portal died. Thinking something terrifying might once again come out of the portal, the blood demon immediately took out a crystal and immediately informed Zagonath about the abnormality. After informing Zagonath, all the demons who were standing around the portal backed away and continued to monitor it from the distance. Around 10 minutes later, the expressions of all the demons who were looking at the portal of the Shadow Realm changed as they saw the size of the portal start to shrink. "Don't tell me this portal is going to close," the blood demon muttered with a stunned face, not knowing what to do. The portal of the Shadow Realm continued to shrink, and in less than 1 minute, it completely disappeared from the place it was a second ago. All the demons looked at the scene with shocked look on their faces, and felt a chill run down their spines, thinking about what kind of reaction Zagonath and Baphomet would show once they knew about this. While the demons were panicking, the place where the portal of the Shadow Realm was located suddenly became chaotic. As the space became chaotic, a portal which was similar to the previous portal started to appear there. Although the portal was similar to before, all the demons who saw the portal felt their heart palpitated. For some reason, the portal of the Shadow Realm now gave them an extreme feeling of danger. BRZZZ. The space around the portal continued to tremble, and the size of the portal continued to increase. In just a few seconds, the size of the portal returned back to its previous size. Although the demons were startled because of the strange feeling that the portal was giving them, they still sighed in relief after noticing the portal was back to normal. They were still thinking about what kind of reaction Zagonath and Baphomet would have shown if the portal had really disappeared. Once the portal returned to its normal size, the energy fluctuations that were coming out of it started to decrease as well. "Looks like nothing going to come out of the portal this time," the extreme demon said in a voice filled with relief. He was afraid that something would come out of the portal, and all of them would die here, just like what had happened to the demons who were previously guarding the portal. The blood demon also nodded his head hearing the extreme demon because he was thinking the same. Just when all the demons were sighing in relief, BRZZZZ. The portal of the Shadow Realm shook fiercely. Boom. A booming sound reverted in thousands of kilometers, and the next second, whoosh, a tsunami of black energy erupted from the portal, instantly covering thousands of kilometers of area in all directions around the portal of the Shadow Realm. If Evan was here, he would have been shocked because the energy was similar to his shadow energy. But unlike his normal shadow energy, the energy that erupted from the portal was releasing an ancient aura along with a terrifying feeling of death. All the demons who were guarding the portal were caught inside the tsunami of the black energy. And the moment they came into contact with the energy, only one word echoed into their minds: death. In less than a second after coming into contact with the energy, all the demons who were guarding the portal disappeared without a trace. Their physical bodies and souls were completely annihilated. Chapter 697. Inside the Shadow Realm, a great change was taking place. The throne within the Black Castle, which was the core of the Shadow Realm, was shrouded in black aura, and terrifying waves of ancient energy were emanating from it. The pressure that the energy waves were releasing was so terrible that every single creature within the Shadow Realm was frozen in place, and no one dared to move. Even Anastasia, who was standing outside of the throne room, didn't dare to approach it, as even though she had partial authority over the Shadow Realm, she could feel that the laws of the Shadow Realm were changing, and it would be dangerous for her if she tries to get close to the core of Shadow Realm. The space of the Shadow Realm was expanding, and its area was increasing at an alarming speed. Because of the little control she had over the Shadow Realm, Anastasia was easily able to perceive all the changes that were happening within the Shadow Realm. Previously, the atmosphere of the Shadow Realm was filled with shadow energy. But now, the shadow energy was changing into a completely different energy, and its power was even more terrifying than before. Moreover, although Anastasia didn't leave the Shadow Realm for thousands of years, she could still tell that the laws of the Shadow Realm became more solid, and were even more powerful than the laws of Utopia. Because of these powerful laws, it was now easier for people to advance their rank while cultivating inside the Shadow Realm. I am feeling like I can finally reach the peak of the world rank, Anastasia muttered, looking at her core, which was trembling in excitement. Not only Anastasia, but many other creatures who live within the Shadow Realm felt the same, and some even broke through the next rank without doing anything. The Shadow Realm is the manifestation of the world that will be integrated with Master's Monic core in the future. But now that this world is changing, it means that Master's Monic core has evolved to a higher level, Anastasia muttered in a shocked-filled voice, and felt her head spinning. But how is this possible for a Monic core to evolve to a higher level? Isn't it said that Monic cores cannot evolve like Prime cores, and will remain the same even after the Monic physique holder reaches rank 1? According to what Anastasia knows, unlike the Prime core that evolves into a different core, according to the life experience of the user, once they reach rank 1, the Monic core can't evolve, and it will remain the same even after the user reaches rank 1. But now, looking at the changes that were happening within the Shadow Realm, she was not sure anymore. While Anastasia was thinking about the changes that were happening within the Shadow Realm, the energy that was coming out of the core of the Shadow Realm merged with its atmosphere. The space of the Shadow Realm continued to expand, and in just a few minutes, the area of the Shadow Realm was at least 2 times bigger than before. Just when Anastasia was marveling about the changes that were happening within the Shadow Realm, her expression changed, and she appeared underground area of the castle. In the underground area of the castle, tens of thousands of black balls were placed in lines. As the energy that was coming out from the core of the Shadow Realm filled the atmosphere, all the black balls started to absorb this energy like hungry wolves. Don't tell me all of them are going to wake up, Anastasia muttered, and her heart started to beat in excitement. If they all wake up, I can ditch all the work of the Shadow Realm on them, and leave here to meet Master, who is probably about to arrive in Utopia. All the black balls that filled the underground area continued to absorb the new energy that filled the Shadow Realm, and faint auras started to come out of them. Crack, crack, crack. Suddenly, Anastasia heard sounds of cracking and noticed many black balls that were releasing the aura of S rank, and rank 1 core evolver started to break. Looks like the lower level shadow undeads will wake up first, Anastasia said in a neutral voice. She did not care about the low level shadow undeads that were walking up and focused on the other balls. that were releasing higher level aura. Looking at the situation, it might take a few days or even months for the higher level shadow undeads to wake up. Anastasia muttered and disappeared from the underground area. After leaving the underground area, she appeared in the place where the pond of the shadow energy was located. Looking at the pond of the shadow energy, Anastasia's lips arched upwards. The energy of the pond is also evolving. If I throw some of them into this pond, they will definitely wake up in just a few days, Anastasia muttered, looking at the pond of shadow energy, which was bubbling with the higher level energy. After confirming that the pond of the shadow energy also evolved, Anastasia returned to the underground area and looked at the 5 black balls that were in the front area. She felt the aura of all 5 balls, and after a moment of consideration chose 2 balls from the right side. These 2 should be enough, she muttered and looked at the other 3 balls. When she looked at the ball that was placed in the leftmost corner, she could not help but tremble a bit. Although I want everyone to wake up, I hope this bastard sleeps for a long time, otherwise who know what kind of chaos he will unleash after waking up. Anastasia muttered and took the 2 black balls away from the underground area. After leaving the underground area, Anastasia once again appeared in front of the shadow energy pond. After appearing there, she threw both black balls into the shadow energy pond as if she was throwing away garbage. With the help of this new energy, they should be able to wake up in just a few days, and then I can leave the shadow realm without worrying about anything, Anastasia muttered and looked at the pond with a smile on her face. Chapter 698. Inside the core evolution room of the Tower of Ascension, terrifying energy waves were sweeping in all directions. Small drops of water that were filled with majestic life force were raining down in the small area of the formation, and Elijah was looking at unconscious Evan with awe-filled eyes. Bar dum, dash. Evan's heart, which was covered in the outline of the rune of origin, was beating like a war drum, and with each beat, it was releasing a terrifying force within his body, which continued to increase his aura. As the drops of life rain fell on Evan's face, his eyelids fluttered and he slowly opened them. 24 hours had passed since he drank the nocturnal potion, and finally, its effects started wearing off. A look of confusion flashed in Evan's eyes when he opened them, but soon he remembered his situation and quickly sat up. What the quote, after waking up, Evan thought that he would continue to feel the sharp pain. But to his surprise, when he inspected his body, instead of feeling pain, he felt an unfathomable energy surging within his body. What the hell happened while I was unconscious? Evan muttered in a stunned voice, feeling the surging power within his body. He quickly looked at his monic core and noticed that most of the part of his core was still in liquid form. Evan was not surprised when he saw that his core was in liquid form, as he had noticed this before he fell unconscious. The energy of the formation was continuously rushing inside his body, and the liquid form of his monic core was absorbing it. Currently, 1/4 of his monic core was solidified, and the rest was slowly changing form. Although the liquid form of his monic core didn't surprise him, there were still many things that made his mind go blank when he noticed them. Where is my prime core? And what is this rune around my heart? Evan muttered in a baffled voice. When his prime core shattered and the rune of origin seeped inside his body, Evan was in an unconscious state, so he didn't know what happened during that time. Is this rune of origin? Evan said after a moment when he noticed that unlike before, he now only had the rune of evolution on his chest. Evan took a deep breath to calm down, and looked at every change that happened within his body, with a focused look on his face. In 10 minutes, he looked at everything and understood most of the things. He also saw the 2 notifications that he had received while he was unconscious. Primordial monic core, huh? Evan felt his blood start to boil in excitement when he uttered those 3 words. He did not know why, but a strange sense of relief washed over his soul when he read the name of his new core. If I am not wrong, my prime core must have merged with my monic core, Evan said. After knowing that his monic core was evolving into the primordial monic core, he monitored his monic core for a few minutes, and after noticing the speed at which his core was solidifying, he couldn't help but frown a little. At this rate, it will take at least 1.5 days for my core to complete its evolution. Evan tried to increase the speed at which his body was drawing the energy of formation, so that he could speed up the evolution process of his core, but unfortunately, his body was already working at its maximum limit, and he wasn't able to increase the speed at which his body was drawing the energy. Well, it seems I can't do anything about it, Evan muttered when he realized he couldn't do anything about the speed at which his core was solidifying, and stopped thinking about it. Elijah, you can stop using this broken skill now, Evan looked at Elijah and said when he saw she was still using her life rain skill. Oh, Elijah nodded her head hearing Evan, and stopped using the life rain skill. Evan looked above him, and his mouth twitched uncontrollably. Will I ever receive a broken skill like this that I can use as long as I want without worrying about anything? Evan thought inwardly and shook his head. While his core was evolving and turning solid, Evan took out from his shadow storage a small red coin, engraved with the faint image of a man with 2 horns. That small coin was the thing he got from Kazal's storage ring. EH 448. Till now, Evan did not know what this coin was, and what was its use. But when Evan met the spirit of the Tower of Ascension, it told him about this small round coin. Once the spirit of the tower told Evan everything about the eldrich creature, it suddenly said that it could feel the presence of a transportation token on him. At first, Evan was confused as to what the spirit of the tower was talking about. But using its power, the spirit of the tower pointed at the small coin that was inside his shadow storage, and asked him to take it out. When Evan took out the coin, the spirit of the tower told him that it was a transportation token. Generally, when people use the Tower of Ascension, they will be teleported to a random location of Utopia. According to the spirit of the Tower of Ascension, instead of a fixed location, people were teleported to a random place, so that they wouldn't be caught by the people just after reaching Utopia and turn into working slaves, without being able to receive any chance to grow up. Evan could understand what the spirit of the tower was talking about, and he also thought that it was the best course of action. If people were to teleport to a fixed location, it was inevitable that many forces would send their people to keep an eye on that place, so that they could recruit people who came to Utopia using the Tower of Ascension. If the people who came to Utopia refused to join them and these forces of Utopia decided to kill them, there is nothing the people who just arrived in Utopia would be able to do because of their low rank. As his conversation with the spirit of the tower ran through his mind, Evan looked at the small round coin in his hands with narrowed eyes. If I use this token, I will not be teleported to a random place, but will be sent to the location marked inside this token, Evan muttered and took a deep breath. Although he was not sure, Evan could guess that the location marked inside the token should be the Demon Empire, and if he used the power of this token, he would be sent to the Demon Empire, instead of some random location. I am not sure what kind of place the Demon Empire is, but with my current power, it would be dangerous for me if I go there, Evan said, looking at the small token in his hands. When he killed Clone in the Inferno dungeon around 7 months ago, most of Clone's essence escaped from the dungeon and returned back to its original owner. EHP 633. Evan was sure that the demon who sent Clone to Aurora World already knew about him, and if he decided to go to Demon Empire in a situation like this, it would be dangerous for him. He thought about all the pros and cons, and after calculating everything, he shook his head lightly. Forget it, instead of going to Demon Empire, it is better for me to go to a random location of Utopia for the time being, Evan thought inwardly, and made up his mind. He looked at the small token in his hand and said with a faint smile on his face, "It is not like I cannot use this token after leaving the tower. According to the spirit of the Tower of Ascension, I can use this token to go to the Demon Empire even after leaving the tower. I just need to inject a large amount of world essence inside it, and it will take me there." Evan put the transportation token back into his shadow storage, and his eyes turned sharp. If I'm not mistaken, that guy Nate must have used this transportation token and gone straight to the Demon Empire after using the Tower of Ascension. Evan knew that Nate also had a transportation token. While staying in Eldoria City, he had shown Nate's image to Noir and other clan leaders and asked them about him. But according to them, Nate didn't come to Eldoria City, which means he was sent to a different city of the world domain, and must have used the Tower of Ascension from there. If that guy really went to Demon Empire, then we might meet again in future, Evan muttered and looked at his core, which was still in the process of turning solid. Evan continued to sit in the middle of the formation, and waited for his core to evolve. Just like this, 40 hours passed in the blink of an eye. Just a bit more, Evan muttered, looking at his core, which was about to turn completely solid. As Evan watched his core, the energy of the formation continued to rush inside his body, and after a few minutes, boom, a booming aura emerged from Evan's body, and his core turned completely solid. Chapter 699. Boom. With a booming sound, a powerful aura erupted from Evan's body, and his monic core turned completely solid. Your monic core successfully evolved into the primordial monic core. You have acquired the Heart of Origin. Your title, Master of the Shadow Realm, has evolved into the Creator of the Primordial Shadow Realm. Your shadow energy has evolved into primordial shadow energy. The effect of your title. As soon as Evan's core was completely solidified, many notifications flashed in front of his retina, but he did not have time to see them, because the moment his core was completely solidified, an immeasurable force surged inside him and started to refine his body. Evan's primordial monic core, which looked like a small black diamond, glowed brightly and released powerful waves of energy that merged with his blood, bones, and organs. All the cells of his body were being refined with energy waves, and his aura was increasing. Rumble. Evan's primordial monic core, which looked like a small black diamond, glowed brightly and released powerful waves of energy that merged with his blood, bones, and organs. All the cells of his body were being refined with energy waves, and his aura was increasing. Rumble. The atmosphere of the core evolution room trembled, and it seemed as if the entire place would collapse due to the aura emanating from Evan's body. Damn it, Evan clenched his teeth and tried hard not to scream, as the energy waves tore through his flesh and started to rebuild it. Crack. F***K. Suddenly a cracking sound rang out, and Evan couldn't help but curse when his bones started to shatter. Crack, crack. All the bones within his body were shattered and rebuilt by the energy waves that were coming out from his primordial monic core. The process was so painful that Evan hoped that he had another potion, so that he could use it to pass out once again. Evan was in a lot of pain during the refinement process, so he didn't notice it, but his appearance also changed slightly during the process. The refinement process lasted for 5 whole hours, and during those 5 hours, Evan's body was completely rebuilt by the energy waves that came out of his primordial monic core. Once the refinement process was over, Evan was completely drained and fell to the ground, without even being able to lift a finger. That was **King painful. He cursed and felt his eyelids becoming heavy due to the exhaustion. But just before he closed his eyes, he saw a notification in front of his eyes and his lips arched upwards. Your primordial monic core evolved to rank 1. Ugh. An unknown amount of time later, a muffled groan resounded within the core evolution room, and Evan, who had lost consciousness after the body refinement process, slowly opened his eyes. Damn it. That was **King painful. Evan groaned after opening his eyes, as he could still feel the lingering pain all over his body. He sat down with difficulty, and the first thing that he noticed was that his body was now a bit different than before. What the hell happened during my body refinement process? Evan frowned as he looked at his body. During the refinement process, he wasn't able to pay attention to anything because of the pain, but now that he looked at his body, he felt something was not right. He stood up and summoned Snow from his shadow storage. Create a mirror for me, he said to Snow in a deep voice, and noticed that he was now 200 cm tall. Hearing Evan, Snow didn't use its skill immediately, and looked at him with a dazed look on its face. What? Evan asked in a confused voice when he noticed how Snow was looking at him. Hearing Evan, Snow quickly shook its head as if saying it was nothing. After shaking its head, Snow used its skill, and a burst of cold energy came out of its body, turning into a big ice mirror. Evan looked at Snow for a few seconds before turning towards the mirror to look at his appearance, and the moment he looked into the mirror, similar to Snow, a dazed look appeared on his face. Who the hell is this guy? Evan muttered in a dazed voice, still looking at the man in the mirror. He lifted his hand and the man in the mirror did the same action as him. Evan blinked his eyes a few times and glanced at Snow beside him. Is this guy in the mirror me? Snow nodded its head hearing Evan. Seeing Snow nodding its head, Evan looked back at the mirror and felt his mind buzzing seeing his reflection. In the ice mirror stood a bare-chested striking man with jet black hair and piercing black eyes. that were giving off the feeling of a bottomless abyss. His chiseled physique, defined by a well-toned body and 8-pack abs, exudes confidence and strength. Evan's face didn't change much and was still similar to before, although his height increased quite a bit because of the body refinement process. The thing that shocked him most was his ears. His ears were now not looking like human ears. Instead, they now looked a bit similar to Elijah's pointy ears, giving him a different kind of look. Moreover, for some reason, now the aura around his body has the characteristic of demons. Evan touched his pointy ears and raised an eyebrow because he felt quite strange looking at his pointy ears. What the hell happened during the refinement process? Evan muttered in a baffled voice and opened his status window. Because he now became rank 1 core revolver, his status window was very different than before, and there were many new notifications that he had received after the refinement process was complete. Evan was a bit surprised when he saw his status window, but he ignored it for the time being, and looked for the reason for the change in his appearance. Although there were many new notifications, Evan still found the thing that he was looking for in just a few seconds. And when he saw the reason for the change in his appearance, he felt as if someone had struck his head with a hammer. Your race has evolved into Eltherin. Chapter 700. Your race has evolved into Eltherin. Evan looked at the notification with a blank look on his face, not knowing how to react. He didn't know what kind of race Eltherin was, but feeling the demonic aura around him and looking at his appearance, Evan could guess that this race had something to do with demons and elves. He continued to stare at the notification for a full minute. After a minute, he took a deep breath and looked back at the ice mirror. I didn't expect even my race will change after the evolution of my core, Evan muttered in a low voice. Because of the information that the spirit of the Tower of Ascension gave him, Evan already knew that people's cores evolve according to their life experiences, once they become a rank 1 core evolver. Earlier, he didn't think too much about it because of his strange situation. Unlike other people, he had 2 cores, so he was not sure what would happen during his core evolution. So he did not waste his time thinking about the things that would happen after his core evolution. Actually, after hearing what the spirit of the tower told me, I should have expected something like this, Evan muttered to himself and shook his head lightly. Looking at his appearance, he suddenly remembered the dream that he had seen a few months ago, after killing Olivia in the wilderness of a straight city. Chapter 366. In that dream, he had seen a man similar to him, who had killed some dragons and saved a woman. In that dream, the man also had sharp pointy ears like him, and the woman whom he saved thought that the man was a half-elf. Half-elf? Evan muttered in a low voice, and looked at the demonic aura around him. He was sure that other than the elves, his race was closely related to demons as well. He focused his gaze on his status window to see if he could get any information about his new race. But to his disappointment, his status window didn't show any kind of information about his new race. It seems I will have to look for information about this race after going to Utopia, Evan said to himself and shook his head. He once again sat down on the floor of the core evolution room and looked at the other notifications that he had received earlier. Your monic core successfully evolved into primordial monic core. You have acquired the Heart of Origin. Heart of Origin. Evan raised an eyebrow when he saw this, and the information about the Heart of Origin appeared before his eyes. Heart of Origin. Because of the Heart of Origin, the path to Origin is now open for you. Reading the information about the Heart of Origin, question marks appeared above Evan's head because he did not understand a single **T about the Heart of Origin. What does it mean by the path to Origin is now open for me? Evan muttered with a frown on his face and looked at his heart, which was covered in the outline of the Rune of Origin. After the evolution of his core, Evan's heart stopped sending powerful energy waves all over his body with each beat, but Evan could still feel a strange power hidden deep inside his heart. He looked at his heart carefully, trying to see if he could find anything about the Heart of Origin, but after looking for 5 minutes, he didn't find anything and stopped wasting his time on it. Forget it. Similar to information about my race, I will try to look for information about the Heart of Origin after going to Utopia. Evan looked at the other notifications and couldn't help but raise an eyebrow in surprise. Your title Master of the Shadow Realm has evolved into the Creator of the Primordial Shadow Realm. Your shadow energy has evolved into Primordial Shadow Energy. Primordial Shadow Energy, Evan said in a surprised voice, and looked at the energy inside his primordial monic core. Unlike the world essence that was flowing throughout his body through the essence channel, his primordial shadow energy was staying inside his core without moving. Even though the shadow energy was looking similar to before, the aura around it was far stronger than before. Although I can't be certain until I try it myself, I can tell that the new shadow energy inside my core is at least 2 times more powerful than before, Evan said with bright eyes, feeling excited because of the power of his new shadow energy. The power of the shadow energy was already terrifying, but with this new evolution, its power increased even more. The power of my void energy also increased because of the improvement of my rank, Evan said after a moment when he noticed the small amount of void energy that was also inside his primordial monic core. It seems there is no conflict between the void energy and the shadow energy, even though they are now inside the same core. Previously, Evan's shadow energy was inside his monic core. Meanwhile, his void energy was inside his prime core. Because both of the energies were inside the different cores, there was no conflict between them. But when his core merged, Evan was nervous that there would be some conflict between his shadow energy and void energy. But looking at the situation, he sighed in relief, because there was no conflict between the energies. Evan was about to look for the details of his new title, the creator of the primordial shadow realm, when his gaze landed on the next 2 notifications, and his body froze. This, Evan muttered in a shocked voice, looking at the next 2 notifications in front of him. The effect of your title. The cursed one is reduced by 50% because of the title, the creator of the primordial shadow realm. The curse effect of your bloodline Doombringer is reduced by 50% because of the title, the creator of the primordial shadow realm. This is the end of this video. Thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed and wish you wonderful rest of the day. The Silent Ruptors out.